The emotions of the emerald-eyed condor were transmitted directly into his heart. It was expressing gratitude for having its life saved and was willing to serve him as a sign of repayment. Samuel Cross smiled. Stroking the head of the emerald-eyed condor, he said, "Good. You've got good judgment. Stick with me, and you won't regret it. From now on, we'll share both blessings and hardships." Samuel Cross proceeded to clean up the aftermath. Marcus White's storage pouch contained quite a few valuable items, but most of them bore the imprint of the White family, which frustrated Samuel Cross for a while. The only item without an imprint was a set of small iron rods, which turned out to be the cage. However, Samuel Cross wasn't sure if anyone would recognize them as Marcus White's belongings, so he only dared to use them in one-on-one battles. The body of Marcus White was left unattended by Samuel Cross. He even deliberately hung the corpse on a large cliff. He wanted to make it clear to those eyeing the reward of 5,000 spirit stones that the one who had paid for the bounty was already dead. After completing everything, Samuel Cross touched his face. According to Selena Fox, this face would only last for a month, meaning it would revert in just half a day. Suddenly, a fiery light flew toward Samuel Cross. He was startled. A sound transmission talisman? He immediately remembered that he had sent one to Emily Turner half a day ago. Samuel quickly grabbed the talisman, and Emily Turner's worried voice came through, "Samuel, don't come. Marcus White has placed a bounty on you. You mustn't come." Samuel Cross touched his nose thoughtfully. He had originally planned to find a place to hide and wait until the battlefield of despair reopened. But now, with Emily's message, he felt an urge to meet her. The battlefield of despair was perilous, and she had been separated from the main group. After some consideration, Samuel followed the direction of the talisman and ascended into the sky. Emily Turner had no way out. Behind her was a steep cliff, and in front stood 3 people staring at her intently, their eyes fixed on her hand. In her grasp was a stalk of spirit grass, emitting a faint luminous glow in the dim cave. Emily couldn't believe it. She truly hadn't expected anyone to kill over a mere 100-year-old luminous spirit grass. No, perhaps they didn't just want the grass, but still. "Drop your weapon and storage pouch. We'll spare your life," a middle-aged man suddenly demanded. Emily gritted her teeth and retorted, "You're quite bold. Daring to target a member of the Turner family. Aren't you afraid of bringing disaster upon your clan?" She didn't believe for a second that they would let her go after taking her possessions. A skinny young man chuckled mockingly, "Afraid? Terrified." A freckled, middle-aged woman interjected, "Hurry up and act. The longer we wait, the more trouble we invite." The skinny young man quickly protested, big sis, don't act. If you do, she'll end up as a pile of minced meat. Let me handle this, please." As he spoke, he trembled slightly while gripping a long silver rope. Emily's heart sank. The greedy gaze of the skinny young man made her feel nauseated. Thinking of the humiliation she might endure if captured, she tightened her grip on the frost crystal blade in her hand. The moment he got close, she was prepared to end her life. "Oh? How leisurely you all are, having a chat here." A man's soft chuckle echoed from the entrance of the cave. As the voice faded, the figure of a man appeared. He wore a jet-black robe trimmed with gold, and the long sword in his hand gleamed brilliantly. Beneath his feet was a flying artifact exclusively used by the White family. Though he had yet to make a move, his overwhelming aura was already suffocating. "Marcus White," the leading burly man exclaimed in shock. The second young master of the White family had appeared, which meant. The burly man hurriedly looked toward the back of the cave. "No need to look, I'm alone," the man said with a faint smile. He was none other than Samuel Cross, impersonating Marcus White. He had followed the direction of the sound-transmitting talisman. If he hadn't coincidentally heard voices coming from a cave at the foot of the mountain, he might have missed this entirely. Emily Turner was now looking at Samuel Cross with a complex expression. Naturally, she didn't know the person who arrived wasn't Marcus White. At this moment, she hesitated, unsure whether to step forward or not. The thin young man darted his eyes around and said with a smile, "Young Master White, you." Before he could finish, he suddenly made a move. 3 steel-throwing darts shot out from his hand, aiming straight for Samuel Cross's forehead, chest, and dantian. The move was swift and deadly, catching most off guard. This was the same trick that had previously ambushed Emily Turner. The darts were laced with poison, rendering the victim unable to use their spiritual powers. Clang! 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 The 3 darts were deflected by Samuel Cross. Such petty tricks of the martial world were all too familiar to him. After knocking the darts away, Samuel Cross didn't seize the opportunity to attack. Instead, he smiled faintly at Emily Turner and said, "Emily, come here." Emily Turner first glanced at the 3 people. Their faces were dark and grim, but they showed no intention of attacking again. Only then did she step over to Samuel Cross's side and said, "Don't think that saving me will earn you my gratitude." Samuel Cross smiled and replied, "Do you think you've been saved already? It's far from over, far from over." As he spoke, he suddenly flicked his hand, releasing several talismans while pulling Emily Turner into his arms and quickly retreating. As Samuel Cross made his move, the 3 adversaries acted as well. The burly man and the young man activated defensive magical tools to block Samuel Cross's attack, while the middle-aged woman shouted, "Humph." She then swung a massive sword, sending it hurtling towards Samuel Cross and Emily Turner. Their plan to let Emily Turner approach Samuel Cross was far from benevolent. They intended to use Emily, who couldn't wield her spiritual powers, as a hindrance to Samuel Cross, giving them an opening to strike. As expected, Samuel Cross's movements were noticeably slower. Seeing the massive sword cutting through countless spells and flying toward them, Samuel Cross didn't have time to think. He grabbed the frost crystal blade from Emily Turner's hand to counter the attack. He wasn't confident in his own longsword and found the frost crystal blade more reliable. Emily Turner, standing on the flying magical tool, was stunned as she watched Samuel Cross. How could he wield the frost crystal blade? Clang! A loud crash echoed like the sound of a broken gong. Samuel Cross was sent flying backward, while the massive sword halted its advance and was called back by the middle-aged woman. A heavy sword without a sharp edge, great skill and simplicity. What a fine sword! Samuel Cross praised as he hovered midair. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth, and his right hand trembled slightly. If it weren't for the cloud-stepping boots with their aerial maneuvering properties, allowing him to borrow force at any moment, he might have been smashed into pieces by that massive sword. You are the first to withstand a strike from Manhwa and still manage to speak. The White family truly has many talents. The middle-aged woman nodded slightly. At the same time, a flash of spiritual light appeared in her hand, seemingly preparing to strike again. Does this sword have a name? Samuel Cross asked another question. The sword is called Great Heavenly Monarch. The middle-aged woman spoke as she raised her hand, sending the large sword flying once more. Don't worry about me. You must leave now. Emily Turner suddenly shouted. Samuel Cross found it somewhat strange. Hadn't she always disliked Marcus White? Clang! The large sword fiercely struck an iron cage that suddenly appeared, sparks flying everywhere. Surprisingly, the iron cage remained unscathed. This was the very cage Samuel Cross had hastily set up and finally managed to activate successfully at the last moment. At this, Samuel Cross smiled at Emily Turner. How are you feeling? Out of magical energy? Emily Turner looked at the large iron cage enclosing the two of them and shook her head. No. I've been poisoned. Though it's not a particularly lethal poison, I can't use my magic for the time being. Samuel Cross nodded and turned to the 3 outside the cage, saying, The 3 of you should leave. I have a talisman treasure, don't force me to use it. The 3 exchanged glances, momentarily unable to decide. Suddenly, the middle-aged woman raised the large sword in her hand again and struck fiercely at the iron cage. Clang! Due to the immense force, she was thrown back by the recoil, while the iron cage merely dented slightly, far from being broken. The other two also unleashed their spells and magical weapons, but their attacks proved even more futile. The iron cage remained unchanged. Samuel cross-eyed, sat cross-legged, and took out a fiery red talisman, placing it on his knees. The three outside the cage were immediately alarmed at the sight. A talisman treasure. It was indeed a talisman treasure. Their expressions changed drastically, and they quickly withdrew their magical weapons and fled in haste. They lacked the courage to confront such a powerful artifact. Emily Turner waited until the three had vanished before sighing, "Samuel Cross, you still came." Though she sighed, her eyes were filled with gratitude, mixed with excitement, helplessness, comfort, and more. Samuel Cross touched his face, confused. "What's going on? Has my face returned to normal?" As Samuel Cross continued to touch his face, Emily Turner became even more certain. This action was an undeniable admission that he was indeed Samuel Cross. She smiled and said, "No need to check anymore. Right now, you still look like Marcus White." Samuel Cross smiled bitterly and replied, "Then how did you recognize me? Even the disciples of the White family couldn't identify me." Emily Turner smiled knowingly and said, "I'm not telling you. Hurry and break this beast cage so we can get out of here." Samuel Cross responded, "This thing is called a beast cage? But if you want to leave, you'll have to wait a moment." Before Emily Turner could reply, a second-level spirit beast resembling a sparrow flew in, circling outside the cage for a while. Samuel Cross seemed to understand the intent of the creature. He nodded, then pressed his hand against the cage wall. Instantly, the iron cage flashed with spiritual light and transformed into several iron bars. Emily Turner curiously observed the spirit beast. She recognized it. It was an emerald-eyed condor. Turning to Samuel Cross, she asked, "Where did you find the emerald-eyed condor?" But she only managed to say half the sentence before abruptly stopping. Samuel Cross suddenly turned red-faced and coughed up several mouthfuls of fresh blood. Alarmed, Emily Turner rushed to support him and asked, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" Samuel Cross shook his head, gently pushing Emily Turner's hand away. He pulled out a small medicine bottle from his chest, uncorked it, and poured half of its contents into his mouth. Sitting cross-legged, he closed his eyes in meditation. The emerald-eyed condor, which had been flying in midair, landed in front of Samuel Cross. Its emerald-green eyes stared warily at Emily Turner. ####Chapter 20, the 20th episode, Frenzied Escape. Emily Turner was in turmoil. She could no longer use her powers, and Samuel Cross was in such dire straits. If those three men returned. Unfortunately, Emily Turner could do nothing but worry. At that moment, a strange thought crossed her mind. It was normal for Samuel Cross to let the three go, but why hadn't he asked them for an antidote for himself? Time passed slowly. Samuel Cross's pale complexion gradually improved, and Emily Turner's anxious heart began to calm down. Just as she felt her powers returning, a flash of white light appeared, and a graceful figure stood before her. The woman wore a white dress as pure as snow, her black hair cascading like a waterfall, and her breathtaking beauty was akin to that of a celestial being. Even Emily Turner, a woman herself, was momentarily entranced. Suddenly, Emily remembered she had met this woman before. Years ago, this woman had taken a sword strike meant for Samuel Cross. A sense of foreboding crept over Emily, and shortly after, she fainted. Samuel Cross slowly opened his eyes and gave a bitter smile. "Selina, I'm sorry." Selina Fox, who had been vigilantly aware of their surroundings, had just informed him of someone's arrival. Selina Fox shook her head and said, "Listen carefully to what I'm about to say. When my powers completely disappear, you must seal my body into the mountain and river diagram. Only when you achieve the golden core stage can you release my soul and body. But you must be cautious. If, by that time, my soul has gone astray, what you release will not be me but a vengeful spirit." At that point, the sound of loud, unrestrained footsteps echoed from outside the cave, cutting Selena Fox off. Samuel Cross slowly stood up. Those who came bore no goodwill, the kind-hearted would not approach. Selena Fox stepped outside first. A surge of anger rose within Samuel Cross. His safety had to rely on a woman's protection. He was too weak, so weak that he couldn't forgive himself. Suddenly, a familiar voice rang out, "Wow! A goddess!" It was the voice of the skinny young man among the three who had fled earlier. In no time, the young man spotted Samuel Cross and exclaimed, "Look! I told you, Marcus White went alone. See behind him? That beauty lying on the ground is the Turner family's young lady. These two are fat sheep. Forget the fat sheep. That celestial beauty is mine. Just one night with her, and I wouldn't trade it even for the Jade Emperor's throne." "Shut up, you filthy toad dreaming of eating swan meat. She belongs to me, Tong Laosan. Anyone who dares challenge me will have to fight to the death. Third brother, don't you already have a wife? Let me have this goddess. From now on, I'll split all my earnings with you 50-50. Shut up." Samuel Cross shouted loudly, clutching his sword tightly. A surge of malevolence in his chest almost suffocated him. The crowd, noticing the fresh bloodstain on Samuel Cross's chest, immediately burst into laughter. There were over a dozen of them. "Even if you are the young master of the White family with great skills, can you really prevail in this narrow cave?" Selena Fox sighed softly. She hadn't expected that her cultivation of thousands of years would eventually be put at risk to deal with such insignificant ants. And all of this was for the sake of a mere low-level cultivator. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but glance at Samuel Cross. But she was immediately startled. In a flash, she appeared in front of Samuel Cross, striking the potion bottle out of his hand and scolding, "What do you think you're doing?" Samuel Cross had just swallowed an entire bottle of elixirs. This single bottle was enough for a cultivator to ascend from the first level of spirit refining to the peak of the spirit refining stage. Samuel Cross smiled and said, "I can't let them talk about me like that to my face. I can't." His words were no longer fluent. The elixirs were too potent, too overwhelming. He felt as though the scene before him turned blood red, and his entire body seemed on the verge of tearing apart. Yet at the same time, power, boundless spiritual energy, flooded his being. At that moment, Samuel Cross felt as if nothing in heaven or earth could stop him. Even the heavens, he believed, he could pierce through. To others, Samuel Cross now looked like a man of blood. Blood seeped continuously from his pores, and spiritual energy surged endlessly from his body. Selena Fox couldn't help but cover her mouth with her hand, tears streaming uncontrollably down her cheeks. These were signs of spiritual energy overload, leading to body explosion. Unless she were a true celestial deity descended to the mortal realm, even with her full recovery, she couldn't save Samuel Cross now. The previously arrogant group began to retreat. If Samuel Cross were to explode, the resulting force could very well collapse the entire cave. Some had already activated defensive shields and summoned protective artifacts. In their eyes, the fate of the White family's young master was sealed. All they needed to do was wait for his death, to seize his storage pouch swiftly. Between heaven and earth exists righteous energy, flowing abundantly through all forms. Below, it manifests as rivers and mountains; above, it shines as the sun and stars. A clear, resonant voice suddenly echoed in the cave, as if a great bell had been struck. One of the group turned pale and quickly fled toward the entrance. He realized that the voice came from none other than Samuel Cross, the blood-drenched figure. The others were not far behind in their reactions, their gazes fixed on the long sword in Samuel Cross's hand. The sword was glowing, its radiance palpable, causing searing pain to anyone it touched. Samuel Cross's state grew increasingly peculiar. As he chanted the sword incantation, the spiritual energy within him seemed to find an outlet, surging toward the long sword in his hand. In an instant, the sword expanded several times its size. The pure white sword aura alone burned through the cave walls. His hair stood on end, and his eyes shone like stars. In that fleeting moment, Samuel Cross broke through his cultivation level, reaching the peak of the spirit refining stage. Samuel Cross nodded slightly at Selena Fox before raising his hand. The long sword in his grasp swung forward. Slash! A dazzling white sword aura flashed and disappeared, as if splitting heaven and earth. Everyone on the battlefield turned simultaneously toward one direction. A blinding white light streaked across, and the entire battlefield trembled slightly. The mountain behind Samuel Cross, after being struck by the white light, tilted and slid sideways, colliding with the adjacent peak and producing a deafening roar. Samuel Cross was motionless. In front of him was emptiness, the mountain had been severed, and as for people, there was no need to mention them. The sunlight shone on him, as if illuminating a clay statue freshly painted. A red clay statue. Thud. Samuel Cross fell straight to the ground. Selena Fox flashed to his side, catching him with one arm. The fact that Samuel Cross hadn't exploded into pieces upon death filled her with relief. But now, why was Samuel Cross lying there like a lifeless log? "Don't worry, little fox. He's fine," a shrill voice suddenly echoed in Selena Fox's ears. She looked up and saw the golden-eyed condor, the one that had fled earlier. The golden-eyed condor shook its head and said, "I was mistaken. I thought you were a cunning old fox, but it turns out you're just a naive little fox, diligently cultivating without worldly experience, yet shedding tears for a human cultivator." Selena Fox coldly replied, "If you don't want me to pluck out every feather on your body, you'd better explain yourself." The golden-eyed condor flinched and immediately soared a few feet higher before speaking. "He has a treasure on him that protects his dantian and meridians." His dantian and meridians were stretched but didn't rupture. His magic power will become much more profound than others, but likewise, advancing to the next level will require accumulating far more magic power than usual. Actually, the most crucial thing is the technique he just used. That spell condensed an immense amount of magic power, something his cultivation level shouldn't have been able to perform. But, Selena Fox stopped listening. Her concern had clouded her judgment, but the golden-eyed condor's words made her realize something. Previously, Samuel Cross had consumed a large quantity of spiritual medicine. Perhaps his meridians had already been stretched back then. Otherwise, why would it take half a year of continuous use of elixirs just to reach the peak of spirit refining? Thinking of this, she immediately picked Samuel Cross up and prepared to leave. The golden-eyed condor fell silent but couldn't help shouting as it watched Selena Fox leave, "You can't go that way. You'd better follow me, I know this place much better than you." As Selena Fox carried Samuel Cross away, Emily Turner, who had been unconscious on the ground, suddenly opened her eyes. Before her was emptiness. She distinctly remembered being in a cave. A cave? She immediately thought of Samuel Cross. Where was Samuel Cross? On the ground lay her frost crystal blade, but Samuel Cross was nowhere to be seen. Gripping her frost crystal blade, Emily Turner scanned her surroundings before gritting her teeth, pulling out her flying artifact, and choosing a direction to ascend into the sky. Whoosh! 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 Within the time it takes to burn an incense stick, dozens of figures arrived at the scene one after another. Such a commotion, it might very well be the emergence of some ancient treasure. The largest group was, unsurprisingly, from the White family, but each member wore an expression of rage. On their way here, they had discovered Marcus White's corpse. With Marcus White dead, they would undoubtedly face the wrath of the White family's patriarch once they returned. They had to find the culprit. Brian Turner, seemingly the leader of the Turner family group, clasped his hands and casually said, "Oh? Brother Darren, what business do you have with us Turners?" Darren White wasted no words and simply waved his hand. The White family disciples behind him immediately carried forward a stretcher, upon which lay a corpse. The deceased was none other than Marcus White. His eyes were wide open, and his chest bore a gaping hole, the size of a bowl. One hand was clenched tightly, veins bulging, as if gripping something, but his hand was empty. Marcus White had died, and he had not died in peace. Brian Turner was horrified and took a step back. The other members of the Turner family also showed expressions of shock. How did this young master of the White family die? Who would dare make a move? And who could possibly kill him? After a moment of stunned silence, Brian Turner stammered, it absolutely wasn't someone from the Turner family who did this. Darren White coldly swept his gaze over the Turner family, and after a long pause, he grimly walked toward another group of people. These individuals, who had originally come to watch the commotion and hoped to take advantage of the situation, now wore bitter expressions. Bad luck, bad luck. A few of them, sensing the situation turning dire, tried to slip away. However, they had barely taken a few steps before members of the White family rushed forward and hacked them to pieces. The news spread quickly across the desolate battlefield. A young master of the White family had died suddenly and mysteriously. The White family was now scouring the area for the culprit. Humph. The White family is still as arrogant as ever. A few years ago, one of their young masters died, and now another one has fallen. If they continue to act so recklessly, one day they'll be wiped out entirely. A young man in a leather jacket said coldly as he examined the corpse on the ground. Haha, exactly. The desolate battlefield is a place where death is inevitable. If you're afraid of dying, don't come here, a burly man laughed heartily. Shut your mouth. Some things are better left unsaid, a youth holding a folding fan snapped. His face was round like a full moon, with a petite nose, rosy lips, and almond-shaped eyes. He looked even more beautiful than a maiden. This is the safe place you mentioned? Inside a cave, Selena Fox, having reverted to her fox form, peered through the hanging vines at the three figures gradually walking away and spoke in a low voice. Sigh, how was I to know they would come here? No one has ever come to this place before, Golden-Eyed Condor replied awkwardly. Just moments ago, it had been trembling with fear. Those three individuals had effortlessly killed over a dozen cultivators. Particularly, the youth who resembled a maiden, he didn't even lift a finger, yet those people willingly offered their necks to him. Cough. Cough. Two faint coughs echoed from deeper within the cave. Selena Fox immediately darted inside. Samuel Cross, who had been lying on a green boulder, was now sitting up. However, his expression was weary, and he was clutching his head, groaning softly. Selena Fox leapt onto the green boulder and asked cautiously, Samuel Cross, are you? Samuel Cross frowned and shook his head. I'm fine. Just a slight headache. After closing his eyes for a long moment, he reopened them and asked, I don't remember much. What happened to them? They're all dead. All of them are dead, a shrill voice rang in Samuel Cross's ears. He jumped off the green boulder, but upon realizing it was only Golden-Eyed Condor, he sat back down. Selena Fox chuckled and said, with me here, what are you afraid of? Samuel Cross shook his head and said, no. I don't want you to protect me. He originally wanted to say, I want to protect you, but given his weakened state just moments ago, he couldn't bring himself to say it. Selena Fox smiled gently and said, then hurry up and become stronger. One day, you'll surpass me. Is there really a top-tier cultivation technique? You're not lying to me, are you? Samuel Cross asked with a hint of doubt as the Golden-Eyed Condor flew deeper into the cave. Golden-Eyed Condor did not turn back and said, it's true, it's true. But you must promise me to help bring that person's remains back to their homeland. As Golden-Eyed Condor spoke, Emerald-Eyed Condor also let out a soft cry, seemingly pleading with Samuel Cross. Selena Fox sneered coldly, humph. If it weren't for someone barging in earlier, I doubt you would have taken us here. You're just afraid of the item falling into someone else's hands, and now you're just going with the flow. Golden-Eyed Condor retorted, Little Fox, your tongue is truly sharp. If I didn't want to lead him here, why would I have brought you here in the first place? This deadly battlefield has plenty of places to tread. In the winding cave, Samuel Cross couldn't help but recall the first time he met Selena Fox. His thoughts were in turmoil, but suddenly his vision cleared. Golden-eyed condor had led them to a place resembling a volcanic crater. Overhead was a small patch of azure sky, and sparse vegetation surrounded them. In the distance, on a massive black rock, sat a skeleton dressed in robes, cross-legged. As soon as Golden-eyed condor saw the skeleton, it immediately flew over, letting out a few mournful and incomprehensible cries. Selena Fox, upon seeing the skeleton, licked her claws and said, "Oh, this is indeed the highest cultivation monk I've encountered so far." Samuel Cross fell into silence, observing Golden-eyed condor's demeanor. Could this person have been its previous master? At that moment, Golden-eyed condor grabbed a dull gray storage pouch and flew over, saying, "Open it, open it. There must be techniques inside." Samuel Cross accepted the storage pouch and opened it. The pouch was quite large, over 10 times bigger than the one he used. However, it was empty inside. Samuel Cross turned the pouch upside down, and only 2 items fell out, a small book and a small iron staff. The iron staff was undoubtedly a magical artifact, as it emanated a heavy spiritual pressure. The small book had 5 golden characters printed on its cover, the Vajra subjugation mantra. A Buddhist sect meditation technique? Samuel Cross was slightly stunned. Nevertheless, he picked up the small book and began flipping through it. After half a day, he put the book away, replaced his own storage pouch with the gray one, then approached the skeleton, bowed, and stored it in the pouch. Selena Fox nodded and said, "This technique is indeed not bad, it has some similarities with our demon clan's methods for body refinement." Samuel Cross replied, I'm quite interested in the Vajra body mentioned in this technique." After some thought, Samuel Cross turned to Golden-eyed condor and asked, "Great King, were you his spiritual companion?" "Who was he?" Golden-eyed condor shook its head and said, No. I didn't know him at all. He did have a spiritual companion back then, though. He helped me awaken my intelligence, and Xiaohui also benefited from his kindness. That's why I promised him to find someone and bring his master's remains back to his homeland." Samuel Cross nodded. "Where is his homeland?" Golden-eyed condor replied, "Blue Radiance." "Don't ask me. It's simply Blue Radiance. On the left, there's a group of cultivators. To the right, to the right." Samuel Cross kept adjusting his direction. The battlefield of the deadly abyss had undergone some changes. Lone cultivators had almost entirely disappeared, with everyone forming groups. Whenever 2 groups of cultivators encountered each other, as long as they weren't from the same sect, a fierce battle would inevitably break out. The battlefield of the deadly abyss had truly become a battlefield in every sense. Samuel Cross was contemplating whether he should search for his sect's team when his emerald-eyed condor, sent ahead to scout, returned. Behind it was a pursuing Tier 2 scarlet-backed hawk. Daring to chase after my spirit companion?" A cold glint flashed in Samuel Cross's eyes as he drew his sword. The emerald-eyed condor flew straight to Samuel Cross and immediately hid behind him. The scarlet-backed hawk, however, dove directly down, showing no fear of Samuel Cross, a spirit-refining cultivator at the peak stage. Samuel Cross smirked. A flash of white light appeared in his hand as the immortal binding rope flew out to meet the diving scarlet-backed hawk, swiftly binding it tightly. A beast is just a beast, unable to even withstand a single move. Samuel Cross was about to swing his sword to strike it down when his brow furrowed. There was a trace of a cultivator's aura on this scarlet-backed hawk. Could it possibly be someone's spirit companion? Samuel Cross. Let it go. A sharp voice rang in Samuel Cross's ears, followed by a fiery red figure descending from the sky. A woman, also at the peak stage of spirit refining, appeared before Samuel Cross. She had sharp phoenix eyes and elegant eyebrows. Despite being a woman, she exuded a heroic aura that rivaled any man. Her attire bore the emblem of the Azure Pill sect, indicating she was a senior sister from the same sect. Hashtag chapter 21, the 21st episode, risking it all to save. Samuel Cross smiled and said, "Your spirit companion? It dared to bully my Xiaohui." The emerald-eyed condor, now perched on the tightly bound scarlet-backed hawk like a wrapped dumpling, was using its claws and beak to attack the hawk's head, which was on the verge of becoming bald. The woman looked at Samuel Cross with an indifferent expression before suddenly pulling out a fiery red needle and hurling it toward him. Samuel Cross was startled. What a shrew! She attacked without saying a word. He kicked the scarlet-backed hawk on the ground toward the needle and quickly retreated. He had no desire to fight. As the needle flew through the air, it suddenly split into 5. 3 of them accelerated abruptly, reaching Samuel Cross in the blink of an eye. Samuel Cross had never seen such a peculiar attack before, but he remained calm. Clenching his left hand into a fist, he punched one of the flying needles away. With his right hand, he swung his longsword, deflecting 2 more needles. The remaining 2 needles, aimed at his lower body, were slower and were kicked away with his twin lotus continuous kicks. With 2 sharp clang sounds, they too were sent flying. For the first time, the woman showed a look of surprise. Though she hadn't been ruthless in her attack, very few could break this technique. She had only heard of Samuel Cross a few days ago. Who would have thought he was such a formidable figure? Samuel Cross looked at his left fist. Bloodstains covered it, and the bones of his index and middle fingers were broken. His legs, however, were fine, thanks to the protection of the cloud-stepping boots. Samuel Cross coldly said, "Oh? Do you intend to claim the 5,000 spirit stones bounty?" His smile had vanished, replaced by a frosty expression. The woman froze for a moment before letting out a scoff and retorting, "Humph. Who cares? Besides, Marcus White has been dead for a long time." Samuel Cross observed her expression, which didn't seem to be feigned, and clasped his hands together in courtesy. "If that's the case, I shall take my leave." With that, he waved his hand, retracting the immortal binding rope that had been restraining the crimson-backed eagle. Freed at last, the eagle dared not linger and immediately spread its wings, soaring toward the horizon. The woman sneered coldly, "Leave? Not so fast." As she spoke, a flash of spiritual light appeared in her hand, and the disassembled parts of a fiery red needle automatically flew back to her. With a swift motion, she hurled the fiery needle toward Samuel Cross once more. This time, it moved 3 times faster than before, with its segments spinning around each other, clearly packing even greater power. Samuel Cross tied his longsword to one end of the immortal binding rope, gripping the other end tightly. With a powerful swing, the rope whistled through the air like a gale. Although the fiery needle came with tremendous force, Samuel Cross effortlessly deflected it. This time, the needle couldn't even get within 7 feet of him. Whoosh! With a flick of his wrist, the immortal binding rope spinning in Samuel Cross's hand straightened, sending the longsword hurtling forward in an instant. The sword's tip stopped just short of the woman's throat, the once flexible rope now taut under Samuel Cross's control. He chuckled softly and said, "Humph. If you want to defeat me, go train for a few more years." With that, he shook his hand, retracting the longsword. A sharp sound echoed as the woman finally managed to activate her defensive light barrier. The earlier strike had been so swift that she had almost believed she was dead. Watching Samuel Cross's retreating figure, she called out, "Hey! Samuel Cross!" He ignored her. The woman called again, "Don't go. No one acts alone in the desolate battlefield anymore." Samuel Cross stopped in his tracks. He was already aware of this. Seeing him pause, the woman quickly added, "I was in a hurry earlier, but there are many of my fellow sect brothers and sisters following behind me. They should be arriving soon." At last, Samuel Cross turned back to face her. The woman smiled and said, "My name is Billy Gaga." Gaga as in weaponry. Everyone was evaluating Samuel Cross. It was him, just a few days ago, he was worth 5,000 spirit stones. Perched on Samuel Cross's shoulders, one on the left and one on the right, were two small birds, each about the size of a sparrow. One of them, with bright, sparkling eyes, loudly exclaimed, "What are you looking at? What are you looking at? Never seen such a handsome bird before?" This gathering consisted of ordinary disciples of the Azure Pill sect, including wandering cultivators and disciples from smaller clans. Billy Gaga curiously asked, "Samuel Cross, where did you catch the golden-eyed condor?" "I want one too." Before Samuel Cross could reply, the golden-eyed condor interjected, "He didn't catch me. I, the great king, willingly decided to follow him for some fun." Everyone burst into laughter. This golden-eyed condor was truly amusing. Samuel Cross asked, "Are we just going to keep walking like this without a purpose?" Billy Gaga responded, "Of course, we're heading to regroup." "Oh, right, we all need to gather at this location." As she spoke, Billy Gaga pulled out a map. It was a terrain map of the forbidden battlefield. This was a mission assigned by the sect, but at the time, Samuel Cross had been evading capture and was entirely unaware of it. Suddenly, Billy Gaga took out a small pink pouch and shoved it into Samuel Cross's hand, saying, "This is a spirit beast pouch. Your spirit beasts can't just stay on your shoulders forever. When they're tired, they can rest inside." Samuel Cross had been searching for such an item for a long time. Even at the marketplace, he couldn't buy one. He hadn't expected Billy Gaga to have it. Without hesitation, he accepted it and hung it at his waist. After thinking for a moment, he took out an immortal binding rope. "I made this myself. Consider it a gift in exchange." The people around them gave the two strange looks. Cultivators naturally weren't as reserved as ordinary mortals, but this senior sister Gong's son was infamous for being fierce and domineering. No one had ever seen her speak so gently before. The crowd began to speculate, with no shortage of exaggerated rumors. "Samuel Cross, don't go to that place." As night fell, Samuel Cross was meditating with his eyes closed when a tiny voice reached his ears. Startled, he saw the golden-eyed condor sticking its head out of the spirit beast pouch. "Which place?" Samuel Cross asked, puzzled. The golden-eyed condor jumped onto his shoulder and whispered into his ear, "The place marked on the map is a large-scale ceiling formation. Beneath it is a powerful monster, though I'm not sure exactly what it is." Samuel Cross nodded. If the golden-eyed condor said so, then avoiding it was fine. After all, he wasn't interested in the sect's rewards. Just then, a deafening explosion echoed across the sky, followed by a blinding light erupting on the horizon, illuminating the entire area. The golden-eyed condor was alarmed. "This is bad. Someone has broken the ceiling formation. Samuel Cross, under no circumstances should you go there." With that, the golden-eyed condor dove back into the spirit beast pouch, refusing to come out no matter how much Samuel Cross called for it. Samuel Cross let out a bitter laugh. "If there was danger, why didn't you run away? Why did you hide in my spirit beast bag?" Suddenly, Samuel Cross thought of something. His expression drastically changed. Could it be? At that moment, boom. A louder explosion erupted. Following it came light, heat, and an oppressive gust of air. Everything that rose from the ground, whether trees, flowers, or even mountains, was obliterated by the shockwave. Samuel Cross quickly regained his senses and activated his protective energy shield. Though the shockwave swept him away, he was fortunate not to be injured, only thrown far into the distance. Phew, phew, phew. Samuel Cross crawled out from a pile of rubble, dusting off dirt and spitting out sand from his mouth. He had been completely buried but was lucky that the debris was soft enough to avoid being crushed. He angrily yanked open the spirit beast bag and roared, "Golden-eyed condor! You scoundrel! You knew it would explode and didn't even warn me." Golden-eyed condor awkwardly replied, "There wasn't time." "Didn't you already activate your protective energy shield? Or do you expect me to crawl into the spirit beast bag myself?" Samuel Cross furiously tightened the bag's opening. "You like staying in there, don't you?" Then don't come out anymore. As Samuel Cross tilted his head to determine his bearings, the ground beneath him suddenly trembled lightly, and an enormous force of suction pulled him into the earth. He fell for what seemed like an eternity, or at least it felt that way. The surroundings were pitch black, there was no sound, no light, just the endless sensation of falling. Thud. Just as Samuel Cross was feeling disoriented, his feet suddenly hit solid ground. He immediately sprang to his feet, looking around cautiously. After falling for so long, where had he ended up? All around him was a vast expanse of black stone, and beneath his feet lay an enormous formation, glowing with a blood-red light. Samuel Cross's heart sank. Could this be the sealed formation Golden-Eyed Condor had mentioned? As he stood there, uncertain and wary, a deep, chilling voice echoed, "This is getting worse and worse. And now, it's just a minor cultivator with barely any spiritual power." Sigh. Samuel Cross was startled. There was clearly no one around. Where was the voice coming from? Almost as if answering his question, the surroundings began to shift. Among the black stones, several massive chains as thick as thighs appeared. One end of the chains was embedded in the black stone, while the other end restrained a humanoid monster. The humanoid creature stood at the center of the formation, towering at a height of 1 zhang. It bore a human-like face, its body was grayish-black, and its skin was covered in intricate patterns. On its back were a pair of wings, with 2 chains piercing through them, locking securely into its shoulder blades. Samuel Cross froze in place, then gasped in horror, exclaiming, "A demon!" This was undoubtedly a demon. The most telling sign was the patterns on its body, demonic markings. Each demon had unique markings, and the more powerful the demon, the more complete its markings were. The demon before him was fully covered in markings from head to toe, clearly a high-ranking demon. Samuel Cross instinctively retreated step by step. Even though the demon was bound with chains piercing its shoulder blades, its aura was unbelievably overwhelming, suppressing him to the point where it was hard to breathe. Suddenly, with a loud thud, Samuel Cross's back collided with something. He quickly turned around, only to see a massive flat stone. Lying atop the stone was a figure in white robes, eyes wide open and lifeless. It was the sect master of Azure Pill sect. His pupils were dilated, his expression frozen in terror, clearly dead for some time. The demon clan member laughed and said, "Kid, don't be afraid. Your cultivation level is so low, and your physical body is so weak. I have no interest in you. Just chat with me while waiting for your cultivator experts to arrive." Samuel Cross swallowed nervously and asked, "Who are you? Why are you here?" The demon replied, "Am I not a demon? I was sealed here. I just woke up not long ago. I estimate I've been sealed for thousands of years." Samuel Cross hesitated. "You." Suddenly, the demon exclaimed, "So fragrant. Kid, you smell so good." Without any visible movement, Samuel Cross was lifted like a helpless chick. His spiritual power was completely immobilized. The demon brought Samuel closer to its nose, sniffing repeatedly. Samuel Cross felt goosebumps all over. Looking at the demon's expression, could it be planning to devour him alive? He hurriedly said, "Lord Demon King, I haven't bathed in months. If you want to eat me, why not wait until I clean myself first?" The demon inhaled deeply, intoxicated by Samuel's scent, and suddenly showed an ecstatic expression. "Oh, wind! A wind attribute cultivator." Its voice was filled with excitement, shaking the surrounding black rocks. Samuel Cross felt his eardrums buzzing before tilting his head and fainting. The demon laughed wildly, "Ha ha ha ha. Bamboo fairy old man, you sealed me here, but unexpectedly, I've encountered a wind spirit physique. With this body, I can recover my cultivation within 1,000 years. By then, I'll let you taste what it's like to be imprisoned for 10,000 years." After speaking, the demon gently lifted Samuel's body, tore off his clothing, and placed a hand on his dantian, muttering, "Luckily, his cultivation is weak. Even if I have to expend most of my essence to transform him into a demon puppet and seize his body, I don't fear resistance." In his unconscious state, Samuel was entirely unaware of his body being altered. The demon used claws sharper than blades to carve strange patterns onto Samuel's body. Each incision drew a small stream of fresh blood, which seeped into the patterns. The carvings on Samuel's body immediately turned grayish-white. The demon used a secret technique to transfer the demonic patterns from its own body onto Samuel's. Unknowingly, time passed until the sound of intense battle roused Samuel. He abruptly opened his eyes, feeling sore and powerless all over, his limbs stiff. After circulating his energy for a long time, he barely managed to move. Turning his head towards the commotion, he saw an elderly man with white hair and beard controlling several radiant magical treasures, engaged in fierce combat with the demon. Although the demon fought barehanded, it could withstand the magical attacks without injury. As the rumors claimed, the demon's physical strength was indeed formidable and unmatched. The old man with silvery white hair suddenly spoke, "Demon clan, if you hand over the item beneath your feet, I will spare your life." The demon coldly replied, "Humph. A mere core formation cultivator dares to boast." The old man chuckled, "In the past, you must have been a renowned figure, otherwise, you wouldn't have been sealed in this demon sealing formation. But now, with your cultivation and magic power so deteriorated, you should obediently hand over the item. I simply wish to avoid unnecessary effort. Otherwise, when your magic power runs out, death will be your only path." The demon sneered, "Humph. Don't think I don't know. The outer layer of the demon sealing formation has already been breached. It's only a matter of time before other cultivators enter. If you don't want to be silenced, you'd better leave quickly." The old man also sneered, "With your meager magic power, how can you hold on until others break the seal and enter?" Under the demon's feet was an object resembling a lantern stand, about the size of a fist, pitch black and unremarkable. Samuel Cross had no interest in it, he only hoped to regain control of his body quickly. He knew that once the fight concluded, regardless of who won or lost, his chances of escape would be gone. As Samuel Cross struggled desperately, the battle between the man and the demon suddenly shifted. The demon was struck on the shoulder by a magical weapon from the old man, his shoulder pierced by an iron chain. He let out a horrific scream, fell backward, and spat out several mouthfuls of blood. The old man, overjoyed, immediately directed all his magical weapons to attack the demon's shoulder. The demon endured over a dozen consecutive strikes, before collapsing to the ground, his body instantly turning a pale gray. The old man, elated, hurried forward to pick up the lantern-like object. After a moment of hesitation, he moved toward the demon's corpse, reaching out to search the grayish-white body. Just as Samuel Cross sighed inwardly, preparing for the worst, the situation took another turn. The demon's corpse suddenly moved. His right hand shot out, aiming directly at the old man's dantian. Completely unprepared, the old man was caught off guard as the demon's hand gripped his golden core. The old man stared in horror, his lips trembling, unable to utter a word. The demon crushed the golden core in his grasp and sneered, "Fooled you, didn't I? My petrification technique, let alone you, even a nascent soul cultivator would find it hard to see through." Samuel Cross was equally shocked. He then heard the demon's voice, soft and laced with amusement, "Young one, you've been waiting for a long time, haven't you? I'll soon grant you freedom." With that, the demon began walking towards Samuel Cross step by step. Samuel felt a chill run down his spine, as the demon's gaze upon him was like that of someone admiring a rare treasure, making him deeply uncomfortable. As the demon smiled, a blinding sword light, white as snow, suddenly appeared behind him. It descended from above, splitting his body into two halves. The old man with silvery white hair laughed, "Ha! Ha! You think that with my golden core shattered, I wouldn't be able to summon the power to kill you." Before he could finish his sentence, he collapsed backward, lifeless. The demon clan had just perished, and Samuel Cross immediately regained his strength. Although his body still felt a bit uncomfortable, he could finally manage to control himself. Struggling to sit up, a flash of white light appeared beside him, and Selena Fox manifested in her human form. She had been waiting for the right moment, never expecting the demon clan to meet its end on its own. Samuel Cross forced a smile and was about to speak when suddenly, something resembling a lantern holder was shoved into his hands. Selena Fox hurriedly exclaimed, "No time to explain, a high-ranking cultivator is approaching." As soon as she finished speaking, a surge of white light enveloped her, wrapping around Samuel Cross as well. The two instantly vanished from the spot. Whoosh! 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 Several streaks of light shot out from the massive pile of rocks. Ah! It's Elder Lu. So, this place really sealed a demon clan member. Drop the storage pouch. Inside the demon sealing formation, a life and death struggle erupted once again. Samuel Cross felt a dizzying sensation as the world spun around him. When his vision cleared, he found himself in a lush, green landscape. It seemed Selena Fox had brought him out of the demon sealing formation. Samuel Cross smiled and said, "Once again, I have you to thank." Selena Fox, panting heavily, quickly urged, "Atlas of mountains and rivers. Quickly." Samuel Cross froze for a moment, but didn't ask any questions. He immediately took out the Atlas of mountains and rivers. #### Chapter 22, the 22nd chapter, Heaven and Earth Beneath. Samuel Cross suddenly felt a strange sensation. Selena Fox would leave him from now on. However, he dared not stop her. This time, Selena Fox had clearly exhausted herself by leading him out of the demon sealing formation. He could not predict what might happen if he didn't allow her to enter the painting. All he could do was watch helplessly as she submerged into the painting until not a single trace of her remained. A long time passed. Only then did Samuel Cross slowly step forward. He bent down to pick up the Atlas of mountains and rivers from the ground. The scenery within the painting remained unchanged, except for the addition of a white-clad woman sitting cross-legged beneath a large tree. Her eyes were closed, her brows slightly furrowed, as though she was either worried or angry. Letting out a long sigh, Samuel Cross stored the Atlas of mountains and rivers away. He then sat cross-legged beneath another large tree, releasing the golden-eyed condor and the emerald-eyed condor to stand guard. Taking out the diamond demon subduing mantra, he began to cultivate. The foundational techniques of Phoenix Resolve were no longer suitable for him. He needed to quickly improve his cultivation and rescue Selena Fox. But after only a single incense stick of meditation, Samuel Cross opened his eyes in astonishment. He realized that his skin could absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, a phenomenon he had never heard of before. Breathing techniques typically relied on the nose and mouth. No cultivation method had ever allowed for respiration through the skin. Not only that, his body had become significantly tougher. Beneath his skin, a network of intricate meridians had formed, binding his flesh and blood more tightly together. Samuel Cross carefully sensed these meridians. They were complex and exquisite, spreading throughout his entire body, resembling demonic patterns of the demon race. Samuel Cross was startled by his own conclusion. Had he turned into a demon? He immediately recalled the excruciating pain he had felt while unconscious, as though his body was being torn apart. At the time, he had dismissed it as a hallucination. But now, upon closer reflection, it wasn't just pain, he had also heard faint murmurs from that demon within the demon sealing formation. All of this must have been that demon's doing. Remembering the strange look the demon had given him, Samuel Cross shuddered. Could it have been attempting to possess him? A demon possessing a human? No, perhaps he himself could now be considered part demon. Fortunately, the demon was already dead. Eastward, the golden-eyed condor flapped its wings and spoke. How far east? Samuel Cross asked, looking in that direction. Not far, just a few 100 miles, the golden-eyed condor replied before retreating into the spirit beast pouch on Samuel Cross's waist. Seeing this action, Samuel Cross immediately pulled open the pouch and shouted inside, "Hey! Great King, is there danger ahead?" The golden-eyed condor, known for its dubious behavior, made him wary. Its voice echoed from within the pouch, "No, no. I just don't like places crowded with cultivators." Wind Origin City. Samuel Cross had heard of it before. It was located hundreds of thousands of miles away from the Azure Pill sect. He hadn't expected Selena Fox to transport him such an incredible distance in an instant. The reason Samuel Cross needed to enter the city was that he had run out of pills. His current body consumed pills like roasted beans, and most of the spiritual energy within them was absorbed by his body. Despite this, his cultivation level remained at the 12th layer of spirit refining. Now, he needed to find a place to refine pills. Wind Origin City was larger than Stonehaven City, and its gates were guarded by Foundation establishment cultivators. As Samuel Cross passed by these individuals, he felt slightly tense, fearing they might mistake him for a demon and apprehend him. Upon entering the city, Samuel Cross couldn't locate the Inferno pool, but found his attention drawn to a tower-shaped structure. This building emitted an intense spiritual energy, twice as dense as the ambient spiritual energy in the air. A plaque hung over the entrance of the pagoda, inscribed with the words "Spirit Gathering Tower." A robust man in brocade robes, also at the Foundation establishment stage, sat cross-legged at the tower's entrance, eyes closed in meditation. The dense spiritual energy was far more beneficial than consuming pills. Samuel's current pills were only suitable for the spirit refining stage, and he lacked the recipe and materials for crafting Foundation establishment pills. Considering this, entering the tower to cultivate seemed like a better option. With that thought, Samuel approached the brocade-robed man and respectfully asked, "Senior, may I ask what the requirements are to enter this tower?" The brocade-robed man opened his eyes and replied, 20 low-grade spirit stones per day." Hearing this, Samuel inwardly smiled bitterly. Such a high price explained the tower's dense spiritual energy. This energy was essentially fueled by spirit stones. Samuel's guess was correct. The spiritual energy indeed originated from spirit stones. The spirit-gathering tower was built atop a spirit-gathering formation. After some contemplation, Samuel took out 400 low-grade spirit stones and said, "I wish to rent for 20 days. The man didn't say much, accepting the spirit stones and producing a token. He engraved a number on it and tossed it to Samuel, saying, "If you wish to extend your time, you can find me, but there are no refunds." Samuel nodded, accepted the token, and strode into the spirit-gathering tower. Inside, the tower was a maze of corridors, lined with numerous private chambers on both sides. Samuel randomly entered an empty chamber, took out the token, and waved it in front of the door. The massive stone slab sealing the entrance trembled slightly before descending, isolating the chamber from the outside world. On a rainy day, Wind Origin City remained as usual. Rain had little effect on cultivators. Outside the spirit-gathering tower, the brocade-robed man continued meditating, unaffected by the rain. As droplets fell from the sky and neared within a meter of him, they evaporated into white mist, leaving him completely dry. Suddenly, thunder roared, and a massive lightning bolt struck the top of the spirit-gathering tower, illuminating the entire structure. The brocade-robed man opened his eyes, gazing at the sky, and muttered, "Could the formation be malfunctioning? Why is lightning striking on a rainy day?" However, noticing no abnormalities in the spirit-gathering tower, he closed his eyes again, choosing not to investigate further. Inside the spirit-gathering tower, a bolt of lightning descended from the sky, piercing through layer upon layer of the tower before entering a hidden chamber. This chamber was the secluded meditation space of Samuel Cross. He was in a semi-conscious meditative state, completely unaware of the lightning's arrival. The bolt struck Samuel Cross directly, producing a crackling sound. If it had been before, such a strike would have reduced him to ashes. However, his body had now transformed into a demonic husk, its toughness comparable to ordinary magical artifacts. The lightning only managed to char the outer layer of his skin. Samuel Cross furrowed his brow slightly. Over the past few days, his spiritual energy had been steadily accumulating, yet he remained unable to break through the Foundation establishment stage. He wondered if this was due to the transformation of his body. Moments ago, however, he suddenly felt a loosening, as if the chains restraining his cultivation had started to give way. Instinctively, Samuel Cross activated the Vajra demon subjugation mantra. The demonic patterns within his body surfaced on his skin, greedily absorbing the surrounding spiritual energy and the residual lightning. Outside the spirit-gathering tower, dark clouds churned, and flashes of lightning illuminated the sky. Several bolts struck the tower's peak, all converging into the hidden chamber where Samuel Cross sat. Inside, the lightning danced wildly, creating a terrifying spectacle. Sizzle! A final bolt pierced through his right chest, leaving a small hole. The lightning within the chamber surged towards the opening, flooding in. On Samuel Cross's right chest, a scar shaped like a lightning bolt formed. Unbeknownst to him, it was at this very moment that his body truly became his own. The lightning scar was the undeniable proof. As the lightning dissipated, the aura surrounding Samuel Cross surged dramatically. In an instant, his spiritual energy ascended to a new level. Foundation establishment achieved. After a long while, Samuel Cross slowly opened his eyes, which were now as clear as an autumn lake. He extended his hand, and a fireball appeared in his palm. Clenching his fist, the fireball extinguished, replaced by an ice spike. Crushing the ice spike, Samuel Cross conjured a crescent-shaped wind blade. This wind blade was noticeably larger than the ones he had previously cast, measuring approximately 1 meter. Samuel Cross burst into laughter. Ha 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 ha. So that's how it is. The mysteries that had eluded him before suddenly became clear upon achieving foundation establishment. Even techniques like the fireball and ice spike, which he had only glanced at in passing, could now be effortlessly executed. Overcome with joy, Samuel Cross couldn't help but dance in excitement. But he quickly noticed a chill on his body. Looking down, he saw himself completely charred and devoid of clothing. Bewildered, he wondered, could I have accidentally cast the fireball technique during foundation establishment? Just as Samuel Cross was reveling in the euphoria of his breakthrough, a strange humming sound echoed, "Ong." The entire chamber began to tremble slightly. Could it already be the 20th day, he thought, startled. Without delay, he grabbed his storage pouch and spirit beast bag from the ground. Before he could open the chamber door himself, his vision went dark, and he found himself standing at the entrance of the spirit-gathering tower. "Fellow Taoist." A surprised voice reached Samuel Cross's ears, sounding somewhat familiar. Samuel Cross looked up. On a green stone slab at the tower's entrance stood a burly man in ornate robes, gazing at him in astonishment. It was no surprise that the man was shocked. Samuel Cross's current appearance was indeed peculiar. His entire body was pitch black, his hair resembled a bundle of straw, and he emitted a faint burnt smell. Samuel Cross said, "Money. Fellow Taoist, you're laughing at me. I encountered a small issue while cultivating a technique, unintentionally ending up in this state." The man in embroidered robes chuckled and said, "Oh. Fellow Taoist, you should be a bit more cautious. The restrictions of the spirit-gathering tower are indeed ingenious, but they only protect the tower itself, not those inside it." Samuel Cross replied awkwardly, My skills are lacking, truly lacking." The man in embroidered robes thought for a moment, then tore off his own robe and handed it to Samuel Cross, saying, "If fellow Taoist doesn't have spare clothing, why not wear this? It's better than being completely exposed." Samuel Cross said, "This is really too much trouble for you." The man in embroidered robes replied, "No need to be polite, it's just a piece of clothing." With that, he shoved the robe into Samuel Cross's hands. Samuel Cross smiled and said, "Then I thank you." He no longer hesitated, unfolded the robe, put it on, and clasped his hands in farewell to the man. As he watched Samuel Cross's figure fade into the distance, the man muttered to himself, "When did I rent out a private room to this person?" He had no recollection of it. Samuel Cross, after leaving the spirit-gathering tower, exited the city. He had very few spirit stones left in his pouch. Previously, Selena Fox had cultivated medicinal herbs in the mountain and river diagram, but now he could only take without replenishing. Eventually, they would run out. Now that he had reached Foundation establishment, perhaps he should follow others and hunt spirit beasts to earn spirit stones for cultivation. At this moment, the golden-eyed condor flew out of the beast pouch and said, "Hey, don't leave. That place with dense spiritual energy just now wasn't bad. Why are you leaving?" Samuel Cross irritably replied, "Great King, entering there requires spirit stones. Do you understand spirit stones?" With that, he took out a spirit stone and waved it in front of the golden-eyed condor. The golden-eyed condor pondered for a moment and said, "In such spirit-rich mountain rocks, there should be some." Samuel Cross sighed, "Staying there for a day costs 20 coins. If you can earn 20 coins, I'll take you in." Golden-eyed condor shook his head in surprise. 20 coins for just one day? Difficult. Difficult. The crescent moon hung in the sky as Samuel Cross stood hidden in the bushes, gazing at the rocky mountain ahead. The mountain was only a few dozen feet high, its surface riddled with caves of various sizes. Countless rats scurried in and out of these caves. Samuel Cross sensed a strange fluctuation of magical energy and was certain that a demonic beast must be nearby. Suddenly, the sound of flapping wings echoed, and a nocturnal owl with a wingspan of 8 feet flew in from afar, landing in front of the mountain caves. Seeing this, Samuel Cross was overjoyed. He could feel the magical energy radiating from the owl, and based on its strength, he judged it to be a second-tier demonic beast. But before Samuel Cross could act, 2 green lights suddenly glowed from the largest cave on the Rocky Mountain, accompanied by a sharp squeaking sound. A giant rat, the size of a wild boar, darted out from the cave, charging straight at the owl. Samuel Cross was even more delighted. The giant rat also emitted magical energy, slightly stronger than the owl's, making it a near third-tier demonic beast. A third-tier demonic beast possessed strength comparable to an early-stage Foundation establishment cultivator. If he could capture both of these demonic beasts, the spirit stones he would earn would surely be plentiful. The 2 demonic beasts were now locked in fierce combat. The owl, naturally a predator of rats, had the advantage, especially with its sharp claws and ability to fly. However, the rat's thicker hide and stronger magical energy allowed it to hold its ground. Occasionally, its long tail would sweep horizontally, forcing the owl to retreat at critical moments. Meanwhile, the forest had become a gathering spot for various ordinary animals, all watching the battle unfold. Samuel Cross noticed golden weasels, red foxes, snakes, wildcats, and many owls among them. These creatures, who would normally fight each other upon meeting, were now oddly quiet, seemingly united by a common goal, the countless rats within the mountain caves. The battle between the 2 demonic beasts grew more intense. The owl's sharp claws and aerial agility gave it the upper hand. The rat, though struggling to keep up, used its thick skin and powerful tail to counterattack. Suddenly, the owl seemed to notice Samuel Cross hiding in the bushes. It let out a low, tense cry, glaring at him before abandoning the fight with the rat. With a powerful flap of its wings, it soared into the sky and disappeared in an instant. Samuel Cross sighed inwardly and leaped down from the tree. His Tauvan shoes and fire demon soft armor had long been stripped away by the demon clan, leaving him with little confidence in chasing a flying demonic beast. The giant rat, still wary and scanning its surroundings, caught sight of Samuel Cross emerging. Its green eyes flashed, and it immediately charged at him. To the rat, anyone appearing now was an enemy. The surrounding wild animals, which had begun to disperse, stopped and gathered again upon seeing someone confront the giant rat. As the rat lunged at him, Samuel Cross sidestepped, his body glowing with golden light. This was the golden body technique from the Vajra demon subduing spell. Though it was only in its initial form, when combined with Samuel Cross's demon ward, it was still formidable. The rat, missing its target, didn't hesitate and swung its tail like a steel whip, generating a gust of wind as it lashed horizontally at Samuel Cross. Samuel Cross didn't dodge. Instead, he raised his arms to block the attack. Boom! His body staggered slightly as he absorbed the force of the tail's strike. Then, with swift hands, he grabbed the rat's tail and slammed it forcefully onto the ground. Bang! 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 Samuel Cross swung the giant rat like a sack of sand, slamming it repeatedly into the ground. Deep craters quickly formed on the forest floor. With a ripping sound, Samuel Cross suddenly felt the weight in his hands lighten. The rat's tail had been torn off. Looking at the giant rat, its mouth was spewing fresh blood, its eyes lifeless, it had lost more than half its vitality. In a desperate bid to escape, it leaped up and dashed back toward the mountain caves. A cold glint flashed in Samuel Cross's eyes. Escape? Not a chance. With a push of his toes against the ground, he shot forward like an arrow, instantly closing the distance and landing above the fleeing rat. The large rat seemed to sense Samuel Cross approaching and suddenly turned its head. What awaited it was a massive fist. Samuel Cross swung down, landing a direct hit on the rat's two snow-white front teeth, breaking them in half. Unable to withstand the blow, the large rat collapsed to the ground, its body twitching a few times before it breathed its last. As soon as the large rat died, the birds and animals that had been watching scattered, rushing into various caves of the giant mountain. Taking the fur and claws of the large rat, Samuel Cross pondered for a moment before stepping into the largest cave of the giant mountain. Could there be anything valuable left inside? The cave was deeper than Samuel Cross had imagined. Even after walking the length of a burning incense stick, he had yet to reach the end. Observing the gradually descending slope, it seemed the cave led to deeper underground chambers. As he ventured further, Samuel Cross discovered several aged tiny fruits, which heightened his anticipation for what might lie ahead. Whoosh! A chilling gust of wind swept through, causing Samuel Cross to furrow his brows. Not far ahead, a ghostly figure appeared. With claws bared, the ghost lunged at Samuel Cross. He raised an eyebrow, stepped forward with his right foot, and delivered a solid punch. The ghostly figure dissipated instantly under the force of Samuel's strike. The Vajra demon subduing mantra, a Buddhist technique, had a certain effect on demons and spirits, and this ghost had clearly met its end by seeking trouble with him. As he continued forward, more and more ghosts appeared. After dispelling yet another one, Samuel Cross suddenly noticed a rat. Given that this was a rat's lair, its presence wasn't surprising, but what caught his attention was the small mushroom growing on its back. The mushroom, no larger than a fingernail, was pitch black, with roots that embedded entirely into the rat's body. Samuel Cross felt a surge of curiosity. What was this? Just as he reached out to grab the rat, its eyes suddenly glowed red, and its body swelled up, growing to the size of a hedgehog as it glared fiercely at Samuel Cross. The mushroom on its back, however, retracted into its body and disappeared without a trace. Strange, very strange. Samuel Cross shook his head and withdrew his hand. This rat was peculiar. Despite lacking magical power, it could transform. It was best not to provoke it. The rat, seeing Samuel Cross pull back, gradually shrank back to its original size. The red glow in its eyes faded, and it became timid once more, curling up and scurrying into a crevice, vanishing from sight. Chapter 23, The Underground World, Part 2. Samuel Cross quickly noticed more rats, each with mushrooms growing on their backs, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. A vague sense of unease crept over him, and he immediately turned back. Rats were everywhere, countless rats. They carried vibrant colors, appearing and disappearing unpredictably. Samuel Cross was lost. No, he was trapped. The tunnel had only one path, he couldn't find any other way out. Something was at play. Boom. 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 Samuel Cross swung his fists, shattering a group of ghosts. But this time, the ghosts were formed in front of him, murmuring in unison, another one, another one. Samuel Cross's face darkened as he threw punches again, dispersing them one by one. But it was futile. The ghosts quickly reassembled. Samuel Cross sat cross-legged. Countless ghosts hovered around him, some even passing through his body. He ignored them, focusing on figuring out how to escape this cursed place. But no matter how much he thought, he couldn't find a clue. If someone wanted to deal with him, why not act directly? Were they planning to trap him here until he starved? The golden-eyed condor, his only companion to consult, lay in a deep slumber. Looking at the ghosts surrounding him, Samuel Cross asked, "How did you all die?" Another one, they repeated. He tried again, "Who is your leader?" Another one, came the same reply. Samuel Cross's gaze turned cold. Suddenly, he raised his fist and slammed it into the ground with force. Rocks shattered and scattered. Boom! 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 Punch after punch, his fists moved like windmills. The ground soon formed a large crater, growing deeper with each strike. Suddenly, cracking sounds echoed as countless fissures appeared beneath Samuel Cross. His eyes lit up, and his fists moved even faster, following the cracks. Boom! With one final punch, Samuel Cross broke through the ground. Beneath the surface lay a vast space, and he fell along with the debris. Thud! Samuel Cross landed firmly, the ground cracking under his feet. He had fallen from a height of several dozen feet. Scanning his surroundings, he found himself in a massive oval-shaped cavern, seemingly endless. Above, a small hole marked the tunnel he had just been in. The ground and walls of the cavern were covered with glowing mushrooms, their bioluminescence lighting up the space as if it were daytime. At the center of a cluster of mushrooms stood an enormous mushroom, almost the size of a small mountain. Atop this giant mushroom sat a peculiar figure, a short, gray-robed man with a rat-like face, pointed nose, small eyes, and long whiskers shaped like a handlebar mustache. In front of him stretched a long line of rats, all silent and queued up. At that moment, the strange man was holding a rat at the front of the line, using a brush to paint on its back. Soon, a red-spotted white mushroom design appeared on the rat's back. Once finished, the man tossed the rat aside. As soon as the rat left his hand, the painted mushroom transformed from an image into a real, physical mushroom. Samuel Cross was stunned. The scene before him truly left him at a loss for words. Should he call it a divine miracle or sheer absurdity? This was far beyond the scope of his understanding. Mice, mushrooms, caves, a magical drawing pen, and a mystical artist. The fact that he had even arrived here was already a miracle. Everything about this place exuded a bizarre and surreal aura. "How did you think to find me underground?" A gentle voice echoed. The voice was soothing, with a neutral tone, making it impossible to discern whether it was male or female. Samuel Cross instinctively took a step back before opening his mouth to reply, "I guessed." "How did you guess?" the gentle voice asked again. Samuel Cross answered, "I saw a mouse burrowing into the ground. I guessed there must be an exit below." The strange figure paused their drawing, looked up at Samuel Cross, and smiled. "So, you trust mice?" As they raised their head, it became apparent that they had 4 eyes, 2 small, elongated eyes above their eyebrows, with pitch-black pupils and no visible whites. Samuel Cross thought for a moment and then said, "Yes." The strange figure chuckled, "You killed my companion, so I should kill you. But since you trusted the mice and found this place, I'll spare your life." Samuel Cross asked, "Then how do I get out?" The strange figure laughed and replied, "The way you came in is the way you go out." "Do you really need to ask me that?" Samuel Cross immediately fell silent. He glanced around and suddenly chose a direction to walk toward. One of the mice that the strange figure had drawn had stopped in that spot. Since he had followed the mouse to enter, naturally, he would follow the mouse to leave. The strange figure laughed again, "You're an interesting person. After all these years, you're the first to make me feel amused." Samuel Cross originally did not want to speak anymore, but he hesitated slightly and finally said, "There are many interesting people out there. As long as you go outside, it's easy to meet them." The peculiar figure shook his head. "I don't believe that." Samuel Cross remained silent. He didn't know how to respond. After a moment of silence, the peculiar figure suddenly said, "If you want to go outside, you must promise me one thing." Samuel Cross replied, "Just say it." The peculiar figure said, "You must promise me that the atlas of mountains and rivers will never seal away mice." Samuel Cross was startled. How did he know about the atlas of mountains and rivers? Even the demons who modified his body hadn't discovered it. After pondering for a moment, Samuel Cross asked, "Is it because mice are your friends?" The peculiar figure nodded. "Yes, because mice are my friends." Samuel Cross thought for a moment and then asked, "What if your friends come to trouble me? What should I do then?" Hearing this, the peculiar figure nodded and said, "Fair point. All right, I'll inform all my friends not to oppose you. If any of them still go against you, you can deal with them however you see fit." Samuel Cross breathed a sigh of relief. "I agree. The atlas of mountains and rivers will never seal away mice." The peculiar figure smiled. He suddenly said, "I like you. So, I can even draw a mushroom for you." Samuel Cross was taken aback and quickly shook his head. "I don't like mushrooms." The peculiar figure sighed. "Fine. If you don't like them, forget it. Go on, go now. Don't disturb me while I'm drawing mushrooms." After saying that, he ignored Samuel Cross, sat down again, and picked up a mouse in front of him to continue drawing. Samuel Cross followed the mouse ahead, moving straight forward. In front of him, there was nothing but rocks and mushrooms. Absolutely nothing else. Samuel Cross's clothes were drenched in sweat. He wished he could grab the mouse and run, but he dared not. The strange being behind him, he wasn't sure if it was watching or not, made him too afraid to act recklessly. After running for several miles, the mouse ahead grew so tired it couldn't crawl any further, and Samuel Cross had no choice but to stop and let it catch its breath. Atlas of mountains and rivers, mushrooms, what nonsense, Samuel Cross thought bitterly. Next time I'll make sure to check the almanac before heading out. Suddenly, the panting mouse in front of him opened its mouth and spoke in human language, startling Samuel Cross. "Hey, human, got anything to eat?" "I'm too hungry to keep running," it said. Samuel Cross stared blankly for a moment before replying, "Do you eat dried meat?" He had encountered enough strange things today that one more didn't faze him. The mouse tilted its head in thought and asked, "What kind of dried meat?" "Deer meat," Samuel Cross replied. The mouse's eyes lit up. "Deer meat is great. Take it out, take it out." Samuel Cross reached into his storage pouch, pulled out a handful of dried meat, and tossed a few pieces to the mouse. The mouse immediately began munching happily. Samuel Cross also ate some himself and took a few sips from a wine pouch he retrieved from the storage pouch. By the time he finished drinking, the mouse had already devoured the dried meat. It nodded in satisfaction and said, "Human, in honor of the dried meat, I'll give you a piece of advice." Samuel Cross raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" The mouse said, "Don't speak ill of the elders here. Don't even think bad thoughts about them. The elders can hear everything." With that, it turned and continued running forward. Samuel Cross, of course, understood who the mouse meant by elders. But now that the mouse had mentioned it, he couldn't help but think about the strange being. Who was it, really? Why did it have 4 eyes? And why was it drawing mushrooms here? Samuel Cross shook his head, trying to suppress his thoughts and refocus on what lay ahead. In the distance, a river came into view. The water was a deep green, occasionally emitting wisps of greenish mist. The mouse said, "This is as far as I can take you. Just follow the river downstream and you'll find your way back." Without waiting for Samuel Cross to ask more, the mouse rolled its body and disappeared without a trace. Samuel Cross stared at the peculiar river, thinking, follow the river downstream? Walking along the riverbank should be the same, right? However, after walking along the bank for a while, Samuel Cross frustratingly discovered that the path ahead ended abruptly. Both sides of the river were now bordered by sheer black cliffs, smooth and impassable. Samuel Cross reluctantly sighed, drew a sword, and leapt into the air. He initially didn't intend to use his energy for flying, as it would deplete his magical power. However, it seemed unavoidable now. Unexpectedly, after flying just a few feet and reaching above the river, the steel sword immediately fell, losing its ability to hover. Startled, Samuel Cross quickly tapped his foot mid-air, flipped, and landed back on the riverbank. The steel sword had dropped into the river, instantly dissolving and melting away, disappearing without a trace. Samuel Cross took a sharp breath. What kind of water was this? He picked up a stone from the ground and tossed it into the river. The stone couldn't withstand it either. As soon as it touched the river's surface, it vanished with a soft plop, leaving no sign it had ever been there. Samuel Cross was at a loss for words. This was truly overpowering. What should he do to Cross now? Would he have to go back and find that strange man? Just as Samuel Cross was pondering his next move, a small boat suddenly glided into view. Overjoyed, he immediately shouted, "Boatman, stop! Take me across the river." Hearing the call, the boatman used a long bamboo pole to anchor the boat in place and turned around. The boatman wore a wide-brimmed straw hat, his face covered in white fur, with drooping ears resembling a dog's. Though humanoid in form, he had the appearance of a canine. Looking at Samuel Cross, he said, "Oh? You want to board the boat? Do you have the fare?" Samuel Cross asked, "How much is the fare?" Clearly a beastly creature, yet Samuel Cross didn't care at this point. The boatman looked him up and down before replying, "1 ear, half a chest." He spoke calmly, as though stating something as simple as 1 coin. Samuel Cross fell silent. Not waiting for his response, the boatman began to push off, preparing to leave. Samuel Cross hurriedly called out, "Can I trade something else instead?" The boatman paused the boat again and said, "A pound of golden nan wood, a pound of black lin wood, or half a pound of dream yellow millet, will do." Samuel Cross shook his head and replied, "I don't have any of those." "Can you take something else?" The boatman continued, "Then, do you have heavenly azure stone, phoenix nectar, or an immortal spirit pearl?" Samuel Cross's heart stirred slightly. Immortal spirit pearl? He felt as though he had heard this name before, but couldn't quite recall it. So, he could only shake his head and say, "Still don't have it, try something else." The ferryman chuckled, "This guest truly doesn't know his place. Has nothing, yet wants to board the boat." Samuel Cross suddenly smiled as well, "Ferryman, none of your passengers have anything, yet you still ferry them across." The ferryman stopped smiling. He looked at Samuel Cross and said, "You can board the boat, but you must agree to one condition." Hearing this, Samuel Cross suddenly understood, "Atlas of mountains and rivers?" The ferryman nodded, "Atlas of mountains and rivers." Samuel Cross asked, "You want me not to seal something, is that it?" The ferryman shook his head, "No, I mean later, when you encounter Golden Rock, seal him within your painting." Without hesitation, Samuel Cross shook his head, "No." The ferryman was stunned and, after a moment, blinked and asked, "Why not?" Samuel Cross replied, "A favor need not be repaid, but vengeance invites disaster. I'd better go back and plead with the other person to send me back." With that, he turned around, intending to leave. The ferryman hurriedly called after him, "Wait. Come back. We can still negotiate." Samuel Cross turned back and said, "Oh?" The ferryman hesitated before saying, "Then promise me, do not save Golden Rock." Samuel Cross felt even more puzzled. Who exactly was this Golden Rock, and what connection did they have with him? The strange ferryman's cryptic words were undoubtedly suspicious. Thinking this, Samuel Cross shook his head again and said, "No." The peculiar ferryman asked, "Why not?" Samuel Cross replied, "I just find it suspicious." The ferryman laughed, a loud and hearty laugh, to the point of tears streaming down his face. Samuel Cross silently watched. After laughing for quite a while, the ferryman finally stopped and said to Samuel Cross, "Get on the boat. I'll take you out. Samuel Cross remained motionless. The ferryman asked, What, have you decided not to leave anymore? Samuel Cross shook his head. The ferryman, understanding Samuel Cross's hesitation, let out a sorrowful sigh. I've been waiting here for you, hoping for your promise. But since you refuse to agree, why should I insist? Samuel Cross asked, You've been waiting here for me? The ferryman nodded. Yes, for 1,312 years, 8 months, and 7 days. Samuel Cross said, You've waited this long, why not make a different request? The ferryman shook his head. A different request? What else could I ask for? Rest assured, get on the boat. I won't harm you. The Great One wouldn't just stand by and let me harm you either. Samuel Cross's heart stirred upon hearing the words, Great Man. The old boatman had already steered the boat closer. Samuel Cross leaped onto the boat and said, How about I find some golden southern wood, heavenly azure stone, or phoenix nectar for you in the future? The old boatman began rowing and, upon hearing Samuel's words, his expression shifted slightly. If you truly wish to, and you manage to find these items, you don't need to gather them all. Just 1 or 2 will suffice. Hand them over to someone named Ling Dang. Samuel Cross nodded. Got it. But the name Ling Dang sounds too ordinary. What if it's a fake name, and I end up giving it to the wrong person? The old boatman chuckled. You won't mistake it. And if you do, it will be that person's fortune. With that, he adjusted his hat lower and continued rowing. Samuel Cross understood that the old man didn't want to talk further, so he remained silent. Sitting cross-legged in the narrow boat cabin, Samuel drifted for several days, growing weary of the endless black stone banks and emerald waters. Suddenly, a familiar surge of spiritual energy from the heavens and earth jolted him awake. He quickly stepped out of the cabin. The waters were crystal clear, fish darted playfully, trees with green leaves and red flowers lined the banks, and above, the blue sky was adorned with white clouds and a blazing sun. He had made it. Samuel Cross closed his eyes and took a deep breath, exhaling after a long pause. Thank you, he said, clearly addressing the old boatman. There was no response, nor the sound of rowing. Samuel suddenly opened his eyes. He was indeed on a small wooden boat, but where was the old boatman? Under the sunlight, the boat began to lose its color, fading rapidly to a pale white. Samuel was stunned as the wooden boat transformed into a paper boat. The river water seeped into the paper, dampening his feet. He leaped to the shore, just before the paper boat sank. The little paper boat spun slowly, before disappearing into the river's depths. Cultivators rarely dream, and when they do, it's usually a warning. Samuel Cross didn't believe he was dreaming. In his storage pouch, he still had the fur and claws of the giant rat. The wine pouch, once full, now had a few sips missing. Moreover, everything felt too real. Samuel stared at the flowing water. If he followed the river upstream, he might uncover the truth. But after a fleeting thought, he turned and walked away. He didn't want to know the answer, or perhaps, he feared knowing it. Sir, this item of yours isn't worth much. If you don't believe me, take it to another shop and see what they offer, said a man who looked like a shop assistant, shaking his head. He tried to hide his disdain, as the customer before him was a Foundation Establishment Stage Senior. Samuel Cross felt deeply frustrated. The fur and claws of the giant rat were only worth 20 low-grade spirit stones in total. Seeing Samuel's darkened expression, the shop assistant panicked slightly and added, Sir, I noticed your materials are quite complete. Where's the incisors of the beast? The incisors are worth more than the fur and claws. Samuel froze. Incisors? He thought back for a moment. Oh. The giant rat's incisors had been broken during the fight, and he hadn't picked them up. Shaking his head, he replied, The incisors were broken when I fought it. I didn't collect them. The shop assistant was speechless. What a wasteful fool. After a moment of thought, he asked, Then where's the meat? Samuel Cross asked, meat? The attendant nodded and replied, yes. Meat. The meat of spirit beasts also contains spiritual energy, restaurants always purchase it. For example, the meat of a spirit rat is very delicious, far better than most other spirit beast meats, which are hard to swallow. Samuel Cross was stunned again. He had never thought about this before and could only shake his head. Meat, huh? I smashed it into paste already. Didn't bother to take it. Pfft. A soft chuckle came from nearby. Samuel Cross turned his head and saw a young woman with delicate features hurriedly covering her mouth. She couldn't hold back her laughter earlier. She had come to sell materials with others and overheard the conversation between the attendant and Samuel Cross. This fool had discarded something valuable and only brought back something worthless. Chapter 24, Encounter by Chance. A man with handsome features and well-defined facial features stood beside the young woman. Hearing her laughter, he quickly glared at her before clasping his hands towards Samuel Cross and saying, "My companion was rude, please forgive her." "You are magnanimous, my friend. I hope you won't take offense." This man had also overheard the conversation between the attendant and Samuel Cross, but he understood more than others. The material from the spirit rat was clearly close to level 3. For someone at the early foundation establishment stage, to break the teeth of a spirit beast, its hardest part, was astonishing. If Samuel Cross wasn't lying and had indeed smashed the spirit rat's body into paste, this feat was beyond an ordinary foundation establishment cultivator. Samuel Cross wasn't angry. He smiled and said, "It's fine. Honestly, I wanted to laugh too." Then, with a slight smirk, he nodded politely and left the shop. The young woman watched Samuel Cross's departing figure, then turned to the man beside her and said, "Big brother Turner, he's much more handsome than you." The man chuckled and replied, "Is that so?" While he answered her, his eyes followed Samuel Cross's figure as it disappeared into the crowd. In his heart, he thought, if he could recruit this person, it would greatly aid their mission on this journey. Samuel Cross stood at the city gate. The gate often bustled with people, most of whom weren't in a hurry to enter or leave, but had come to check the bounty board. Every city had a bounty board. Cultivators seeking items they couldn't find on the market would pay a fee to post a bounty. If someone found the listed items, they could either hand them directly to the cultivator guarding the board in exchange for spirit stones or use the guard to contact the person who issued the bounty. Samuel Cross, of course, had also come to check the board. 20 low-grade spirit stones weren't enough for him, not even close. What could he do with that? As he scanned the rows of information, Samuel Cross grew a bit frustrated. The items sought were incredibly varied, but most of them were unfamiliar to him. Should he read a few books on spirit beast encyclopedias and herbal compendiums before venturing out again? Samuel Cross thought, feeling annoyed. At this moment, a sudden voice called out, "Oh, my friend, we meet again." Samuel Cross heard the voice, seemingly addressing him. Turning around, he saw the man with a refined appearance he had encountered at the shop earlier. The man smiled and said, "Friend, may I have a word with you?" With that, he made a gesture inviting him. Although Samuel Cross didn't understand why, seeing that the man didn't seem like a bad person and given they were within the city, he nodded in agreement. Following the man through an alley, they quickly arrived in front of a small courtyard. The man pushed open the gate and entered, saying, "This is where some of my friends and I reside." "Oh, I haven't introduced myself yet. My surname is Turner, Andrew Turner." Samuel Cross replied, "Mr. Turner, my surname is Cross." Samuel Cross. Andrew Turner clasped his hands and said, "Brother Samuel. To be honest, my friends and I often form teams to hunt demonic beasts. This time, there's a bounty item on the board, and we found its whereabouts. However, we're short on manpower. Earlier at the shop, I heard that you managed to handle a near third-level demonic rat on your own. So, I'd like to invite you to join us." Samuel Cross asked, "Form a hunting team?" It wasn't uncommon in the marketplace for people to form temporary teams, usually among acquaintances. But being approached so suddenly by a stranger, could there be ulterior motives? Samuel Cross couldn't help but feel uneasy at the thought. Although combat was forbidden within the city, if the other party had other means, he was alone and vulnerable. Andrew Turner seemed to see through Samuel Cross's thoughts and smiled, saying, "Brother Samuel, don't worry. We have some reputation in this city. Besides, he trailed off. Samuel Cross, dressed in shabby clothes and haggling over a few dozen low-grade spirit stones with the shopkeeper, if they were to target someone, it wouldn't be someone as seemingly poor as him." Hearing this, Samuel Cross looked at Andrew Turner's expression and understood. He chuckled and said, "Ah, indeed. I've just stepped onto the path of cultivation. Although I've reached foundation establishment, I'm still quite inexperienced. I must have made you laugh." Andrew Turner laughed heartily. "Haha, Brother Samuel, what are you saying? We are all brothers under the heavens. This time, we're not only inviting you, but also a few others. Whatever we gain on this trip will be shared equally, it's a chance to make friends." With that, he patted Samuel Cross on the shoulder and strode inside. In the main hall, 4 people were seated, chatting. Upon seeing Andrew Turner enter, one of them greeted, "Brother Turner, you're back?" The helper you mentioned. Before finishing his sentence, he noticed Samuel Cross behind Andrew Turner and immediately stood up, asking, "And who might this friend be?" Seeing that Samuel Cross was also a foundation establishment cultivator, he dared not show any disrespect. The other 3 also stood up simultaneously, clasping their hands towards Samuel Cross. Andrew Turner gestured for everyone to sit down and not stand on ceremony. Then he turned to Samuel Cross and said, "Brother Samuel, please take a seat as well." Once all 5 were seated, Andrew Turner smiled and introduced, "This is a new friend of mine, Samuel Cross, Brother Samuel." Before Andrew Turner could finish, Samuel Cross noticed him looking over and promptly added, "I am a rogue cultivator practicing body refinement. I won't claim much, but I do have some strength." As soon as Samuel Cross spoke, everyone was slightly surprised. Even Andrew Turner was a bit taken aback and said, "Does that mean, Brother Samuel, you handled that near 3rd-level demonic rat barehanded? Body refining may sound economical. In the early stages, if resources are scarce, even the cost of magical artifacts can be saved. However, body refining absorbs nearly half of the spiritual energy from heaven and earth, which gets wasted on nourishing the body rather than advancing magical power. Moreover, upon reaching the golden core stage, since golden core cultivators possess magical treasures, their offensive power is often harder than the body of a body refining cultivator, making body refining lose its advantage. Therefore, only those with extremely poor aptitude or those who know they have no hope of advancing to the golden core stage choose body refining. The others, hearing that Samuel Cross was a body refining cultivator, all nodded. The strength of body refining cultivators is generally not too weak, at least at the foundation establishment stage. One of them laughed and said, "Turner, you're being absurd. Fighting barehanded is only natural." After that, everyone nodded in agreement. Andrew Turner then began introducing the other 3 to Samuel Cross. Samuel Cross was leisurely flipping through books in a study room. The beasts that Andrew Turner and the others intended to deal with seemed challenging, so they decided to let Samuel Cross stay for a few days while they invited a few more people before setting off. Samuel Cross, of course, had no objections. Moreover, the place had many books, not cultivation manuals or secret techniques, but the kind of books Samuel Cross was most interested in, such as bestiaries and herb guides. Naturally, the golden-eyed condor and emerald-eyed condor had been secretly released by him to monitor the surroundings. If anyone harbored ill intentions toward him, he would know in advance. Time flew by, and over half a month had passed. Samuel Cross had finished reading all the books. While he couldn't claim to have memorized them, he could generally identify most beasts by name if encountered. Today, as he was reading a marine beast bestiary, someone lightly knocked on the door. Samuel Cross opened the door to find the girl with a delicate appearance from the shop that day. Smiling, he asked, "Miss White, what brings you here?" Sophia White glanced at the bestiary in Samuel Cross's hand and said, "If you like these books, I'll gift you a few." Right now, everyone is in the main hall, discussing the journey. Samuel Cross nodded and replied, "Oh, I see. It's been quite some time." Saying this, he placed the bestiary on the table. Before leaving the room, he glanced at an old calendar laid open. February 2nd, the dragon raises its head. Auspicious for engagements, betrothals, wealth ceremonies, and rooster crowing rituals. Unfavorable for sacrifices, enlightenment ceremonies, weddings, or housewarming. In the main hall, Andrew Turner, Kevin Owens, Edward Turner, Victor Miles, Henry Wells, and William Stone, whom Samuel Cross had met a few days ago, were present. Additionally, there were 3 unfamiliar cultivators, all at the foundation establishment stage. Among them, 2 were at the mid-stage, and 1 was at the late stage. When Andrew Turner saw Samuel Cross and Sophia White enter, he introduced them, saying, "You may already know these 2. This is Daniel Brooks. This is Arthur Gray. And this young lady is Emma Stoner, Miss Stoner." He then pointed to Samuel Cross and said, "And this is Samuel Cross, brother Samuel." Emma Stoner was the late-stage foundation establishment cultivator, the highest cultivation level among the group. Samuel Cross couldn't help but take a closer look. The woman had fair skin, an ordinary face without makeup, and exuded a calm aura, resembling a refined lady from a noble family, completely unlike a decisive, battle-hardened cultivator. Emma Stoner calmly met the astonished gazes of the others, merely nodding slightly. It seemed that, apart from Samuel Cross, the others had at least heard of Emma Stoner's name, to some extent. Andrew Turner coughed lightly and said, "All right, now that everyone is acquainted, let's set out from the city." After speaking, he took the lead and walked out of the main hall. Samuel Cross felt a bit uneasy. Had these people just discussed something without him? However, with his low cultivation level, it wasn't appropriate for him to ask, so he could only follow along. Among the group, there were only 3 early-stage foundation establishment cultivators, Samuel Cross, Sophia White, and Victor Miles. It seemed the target this time was a formidable demonic beast, requiring the mobilization of so many foundation establishment cultivators. After traveling several hundred miles outside the city, someone in the group finally spoke up. It was Arthur Gray, who stepped onto his longsword and approached Andrew Turner, saying, "Brother Turner, we've come this far from the city, don't you think it's time to explain the purpose of this trip? Look at this, 11 foundation establishment cultivators, what kind of demonic beast are we dealing with?" Andrew Turner, hearing this, noticed that the others not part of his group were also looking over. He smiled and said, "It's not that I didn't want to tell you, it's just that this demonic beast is highly secretive. Have any of you heard of the 5-elemental beast?" As soon as the words 5-elemental beast were spoken, Samuel Cross was startled. If he had heard this name a few days ago, he wouldn't have paid it much attention. But now, he fully understood the significance of those 3 words. The 5-elemental beast was a rare and extraordinary creature, with no fixed form or species. However, they all shared one common trait: their demon core was multicolored, ranging from at least 2 colors to a maximum of 5. A 5-elemental beast with a 5-colored core was proficient in 5-elemental magics, making it incredibly difficult to deal with. The most valuable aspect of this beast was its demon core, which, when used in artifact crafting, could bind 2 magical artifacts or tools into a set. Such paired artifacts would consume less spiritual energy, have enhanced power, and might even gain unique special abilities. The others also displayed looks of astonishment. Even Emma Stoner, usually calm and ethereal, showed a rare expression of shock. Andrew Turner seemed quite pleased with everyone's reactions and smiled as he said, "In truth, this is merely a juvenile 5-elemental beast of the turtle variety, estimated to be at the 5th rank, definitely not exceeding the 6th rank, I can stake my head on this." You've all seen the bounty board. The purchase price for a 5 elemental beast's demon core starts at 50,000 spirit stones. Andrew Turner continued, the spirit stones will be divided equally among everyone, giving each of you a few thousand. It's worth the effort. Since my brothers and I organized this, naturally we'll take a bit more benefit. Aside from the demon core, this beast also has. Emma Stoner suddenly interjected, I want the materials from the 5 elemental beast. With her being the highest cultivation level among them, she naturally had the right to make such a demand. As for the others, though greed flickered in their hearts, they didn't dare voice any objections. After all, they were being given the opportunity to earn a share of several thousand spirit stones. Andrew Turner frowned and said, this matter. Emma Stoner added, I don't need the spirit stones, I just want a portion of the materials. Andrew Turner glanced at his team members, then sighed and said, all right. We must keep the turtle shell for ourselves. As for the other materials, you can select some. The spirit stones from the demon core, 30,000 will be divided equally, and 20,000 will go to those who contribute the most. Hearing this, Emma Stoner had no objections and nodded, saying, agreed. Regarding the others, their opinions held no weight and they had no right to speak. Samuel Cross silently calculated, 30,000 divided would amount to around 3,000 spirit stones. However, the 5 elemental beast was still young. Its demon core likely had only 2 colors, rendering it not very useful. If captured alive and raised to maturity, that would truly be a path to wealth. After flying for an entire day, the group landed on a desolate mountain. Samuel Cross thought they had arrived at their destination, but to his surprise, everyone suddenly dispersed in all directions. As he stood puzzled, he heard Andrew Turner speak beside him, don't be alarmed, they're just checking if anyone is following us. After all, our group is rather conspicuous. About the time it took for an incense stick to burn, everyone regrouped, changed direction, and continued their journey while lowering their altitude, flying close to the ground. 3 days later, from a distance, the group saw an expansive wasteland stretching out before them. Upon reaching the edge of the desert, Andrew Turner landed first, followed by the others. He explained, beyond this wasteland lies a swamp. The center of the swamp is our destination. However, this wasteland is home to a type of flying locust, a first-level insect beast, which exists in overwhelming numbers. If we continue flying, we'll be swarmed and attacked. Arthur Gray, skeptical, said, first-level insect beasts? Aren't they as easy to deal with as flipping a hand? Why waste time walking? Andrew Turner merely smiled faintly, not denying the claim. His meaning was clear, if you don't believe it, go ahead and try. Arthur Gray glanced at Daniel Brooks, Samuel Cross, and then Emma Stoner, before suddenly stepping on his sword and soaring into the sky. The 4 of them, being invited guests, naturally had prior communication among themselves. As Arthur Gray became a small dot in the sky, Andrew Turner sighed and drew a long sword, slicing several lines into the ground to form large squares. Sophia White, Edward Turner, and the others immediately stepped forward to help, digging up blocks of earth and using a petrification spell to temporarily turn them into stone. They then stacked these large stone blocks into a stone house. Samuel Cross and the other 2, unsure of what they were doing and not being asked to help, simply stood by and watched. Shortly after the stone house was completed, Arthur Gray returned, flying back at 3 times the speed he had left. Behind him loomed a massive black cloud that filled the sky. It was an endless swarm of flying locusts. As Arthur Gray's figure drew closer, Andrew Turner called out to everyone, quick, get inside the stone house. These insects can't harm us and will disperse soon enough. Edward Turner, Sophia White, and the others, having just finished building the house, promptly entered. Only then did Samuel Cross and the other 2 understand, they had built the stone house to fend off the swarm. Perhaps they knew that others wouldn't believe them without first-hand experience, which is why they hadn't stopped Arthur Gray. When Arthur Gray finally landed and scurried into the stone house, disheveled, Edward Turner carried a large stone slab and sealed the entrance shut. The sound of thudding echoed incessantly, as if hailstones were pelting outside. Inside the stone house, though shrouded in darkness, everyone could see the grim expression on Arthur Gray's face. After a long silence, someone finally spoke up, "Hey, can we talk now?" Immediately, another voice responded, "Yes." Daniel Brooks broke the silence, addressing Arthur Gray. "Mr. Gray, what exactly happened?" Arthur Gray, his face pale, forced a bitter smile and said, "Sigh, I had only flown about 10 miles when I suddenly heard the flapping of insect wings. At first, I paid no attention, but the moment the first wing beat sounded, it immediately attracted more and more flapping noises. By the time I realized something was wrong, a swarm of locusts had surrounded me. They charged at me like mad, completely unfazed by my attacks. The more I fought them, the more of them came. In the end, I had no choice but to flee." Andrew Turner remarked, "With the strength of our team, we could exterminate these locusts, but it would take too much effort. Let's just leave them be." After hiding in the stone house for half a day, the insects outside finally went silent. One by one, the group cautiously stepped out. This time everyone obediently followed Andrew Turner and the others, no longer mentioning the idea of flying. A soft "oh" escaped Andrew Turner, who was leading the way, as he suddenly stopped in his tracks. The group quickly gathered around. In front of Andrew Turner lay several corpses, faintly recognizable as 4 men and 1 woman. These deceased individuals were cultivators. Their bodies had not yet fully decomposed, their clothing remained intact, and even their storage pouches had not been taken. It didn't appear to be a robbery. Daniel Brooks commented, "This doesn't seem like the work of demonic beasts." Andrew Turner nodded, "Definitely not." Samuel Cross asked, "Mr. Turner, when was the last time you came here?" Andrew Turner replied, "About 3 months ago." Daniel Brooks said, 3 months? If it wasn't wild animals, then these people likely died during that time period. After all, a cultivator's body, tempered by spiritual power, doesn't decompose so easily. Suddenly, Arthur Gray reached out, intending to grab a storage pouch from one of the corpses. However, Emma Stoner stopped him, shaking her head and warning, "Don't touch it. Something feels off." The moment Emma Stoner finished speaking, both Samuel Cross and Daniel Brooks instinctively moved closer to each other, distancing themselves from Andrew Turner and his group. It was Andrew Turner who had led them here. Could it have been his group that caused this? Andrew Turner forced a bitter smile and said, "Fellow Taoist Stoner, Taoist Brooks, and Taoist Gray, what do those looks mean? You all know the character of my brothers and me. Do you think we're the kind of people who would do such a thing?" #### Chapter 25, The 25th Act, Desolation. Arthur Gray sneered coldly, "The dead cannot speak. Whether it was you or not, only the heavens know now." Emma Stoner suddenly shook her head and said, "It wasn't them. Don't touch these corpses, or the items on them. Let's go." With that, she turned and left first. Emma Stoner's words aligned with what Samuel Cross wanted to say. He could sense the Een energy emanating from these corpses. Ghostly entities carried Een energy, and although the Een energy on these corpses was not as distinct as that of spirits, it was still present. As Emma Stoner departed, Daniel Brooks and Samuel Cross immediately followed, with the others trailing behind. Andrew Turner quickly caught up, once again taking the lead. However, an indescribable atmosphere now lingered among the group, with each person maintaining a deliberate distance from one another. The crescent moon hung like a blade in the sky. A faint mist enveloped the desolate plains. After some discussion, the group decided to stop and rest, as they had not had proper rest for days. Samuel Cross pulled out dried meat and fruit preserves, devouring them ravenously. He was starving. After exchanging a silent understanding with Daniel Brooks and the others, they agreed to take turns keeping watch. Naturally, the rest did not truly sleep either, instead sitting cross-legged in meditation, closing their eyes to restore their energy. Samuel Cross was the first to stand guard. Rather than meditating, he leaned against a tree, gazing up at the sky. The dim moonlight should have meant bright stars, but tonight, the stars were obscured, shrouded further by the thick mist, a foreboding sign, as if heralding the emergence of spirits in this barren land. Samuel Cross thought as much and suddenly chuckled at himself. Seeing a few dead bodies during the day had led him to think of ghosts. Even if there were ghosts, he had no reason to fear them. His Vajra exorcism chant was designed to subdue such entities. His self-deprecating smile had barely faded when the sound of clashing weapons reached his ears. Startled, he sprang to his feet. Who was fighting whom? In the distance, he saw 4 figures locked in fierce combat. Samuel Cross couldn't make out their faces and quickly glanced around. Nearby stood several of his companions, Emma Stoner, Daniel Brooks, and Arthur Gray. Looking across, Andrew Turner and the others were also present. Everyone in their group was accounted for, so who were the ones fighting? Sophia White suddenly exclaimed, It's the dead people we saw earlier today. As soon as she spoke, everyone recognized them. Indeed, it was the corpses they had encountered earlier in the day. But corpses were just that, lifeless bodies. Everyone could confirm that those corpses had been dead for a long time. So why were they now fighting in the wilderness? Emma Stoner spoke in a low voice, Prepare yourselves. In a moment, we'll strike together, no matter what it is, destroy it completely. Everyone immediately nodded. Emma Stoner and Andrew Turner exchanged glances, then suddenly charged forward together. One unleashed a barrage of fireballs, more than 10 in total, while the other summoned a flying pair of scissors, aiming to cut down the undead figures. The rest of the group also began casting spells. Those skilled in fire magic used fireballs and fire bullets, while others relied on magical artifacts to attack. Only Samuel Cross, his entire body glowing with golden light, charged directly at the undead. Samuel Cross didn't even have a chance to make a move. After the frenzied storm of attacks, the figures turned into charred corpses. The group raised their protective shields, surrounding the area cautiously from a distance. Daniel Brooks frowned and said, Are they zombies? Andrew Turner replied, Not zombies. When they fought just now, their movements were too agile. Emma Stoner added, The Een energy is faint, it feels like they were being controlled as refined corpses. Samuel Cross said, There's still one more. The group fell silent. They all knew. Earlier in the day, they had seen 5 corpses, but now there were only 4 here. One was missing. To be precise, the female corpse was nowhere to be found. Andrew Turner turned to Victor Miles and asked, Victor, you've studied ghostly arts a bit. Do you see anything unusual? As Andrew Turner spoke, everyone turned to look at Victor Miles. Victor Miles, a middle-aged man dressed like a scholar, had remained silent throughout their journey. Hearing Andrew Turner's question, he pondered for a moment before replying, It strongly resembles the method of controlling refined corpses, but there's no trace of any magical fluctuations. If these corpses were truly being controlled, then the one behind it is either a ghost cultivator or an actual ghostly entity. Hee, you guessed right. Here's your reward, a woman's playful voice suddenly rang out. The group immediately readied their weapons, scanning their surroundings. Suddenly, Kevin Owens shouted, Fourth brother. Without another word, he swung his blade straight toward Victor Miles, slicing him in half like a wooden post. The group's expressions changed drastically, and they quickly distanced themselves from Kevin Owens. Andrew Turner exclaimed in shock, Kevin, what are you doing? As he spoke, spiritual light flickered in his hand, as if preparing to cast a spell. Samuel Cross and Emma Stoner suddenly shouted in unison, Stop. As their voices echoed, Samuel Cross and Emma Stoner exchanged glances. Finally, Samuel Cross continued, There was a ghostly claw piercing through Brother Miles' dantian. Brother Owens was trying to sever the ghostly hand. Hearing this, the group immediately turned their gaze toward Victor Miles' corpse. Indeed, there was a bloody hole in his dantian. It seemed he had already died before the blade struck, which explained why no scream of pain had been heard when he was cut down. Andrew Turner's face darkened as he stared intently at Samuel Cross and said, Brother Samuel, when exactly did you see the ghostly claws? His voice carried a tone of anger. Samuel Cross gave a wry smile and replied, Brother Owen's loud shout caught my attention. Emma Stoner interjected, from the moment that eerie laughter echoed to the time Brother Miles was attacked, it all happened in an instant. He didn't even have time to react. How could anyone else have managed to save him? Since Samuel Cross was temporarily her companion, she immediately spoke up upon hearing Andrew Turner's implied questioning. Sophia White added, for now, we should remain cautious. That creature surely hasn't left yet. As soon as Sophia White finished speaking, everyone couldn't help but shiver and quickly huddled closer together. Andrew Turner let out a bitter laugh and said, Brother Samuel, I apologize. I was momentarily rash. Please don't take it to heart. You and Miss Stoner seem to have the ability to sense this ghostly entity. We'll have to rely on the two of you this time. Samuel Cross sighed and said, Brother Turner, you're too kind. However, I truly am not afraid of this creature. Everyone, just focus on protecting yourselves. Although I can't find it, if it dares to come for me, I swear it won't leave unscathed. The others felt a mix of relief and concern. But what if the creature doesn't come for him? Hee, such arrogance, young man. The same eerie laughter from before echoed once more. Upon hearing it, everyone felt secretly relieved, at least the creature seemed to be targeting Samuel Cross. Just then, Samuel Cross shouted, Move quickly. Without hesitation, he threw a powerful punch. The group didn't understand who Samuel Cross was addressing, but instinctively scrambled away. They turned to see Arthur Gray clutching his stomach, blood spilling from his mouth. He hadn't been injured by the ghostly entity, but had instead been struck by Samuel Cross's punch. Samuel Cross stood stunned and stammered, Brother Gray, Arthur Gray waved a hand weakly and said, No need to explain. I understand. I can feel it, it's so cold. With that, he retrieved a vial of medicinal pills, took one out, and swallowed it. At this point, everyone turned their gaze toward Emma Stoner. It seemed she could sense the ghostly entity as well. Moreover, she had warned everyone earlier in the day not to touch those corpses. Her cultivation level was higher than Samuel Cross's, perhaps she had a solution. Seeing everyone's expectant looks, Emma Stoner shook her head and said, I don't have a way either. Like Samuel Cross, I'm not afraid of this creature, but I can't capture it. Andrew Turner gritted his teeth and said, We'll fly at full speed. I don't believe those demonic creatures can catch up to us. Hearing this, everyone nodded. While the flying insects were troublesome, they were not fatal. The real threat was the demonic entity that sought their lives. Andrew Turner was the first to take out a flying sword, leaping onto it and soaring into the horizon like a streak of light. Several other streaks of light followed. Samuel Cross was the slowest among them. His longsword, being the lowest grade magical weapon, couldn't keep up with the others, leaving him trailing behind. The flying insects soon appeared, though fewer in number compared to the daytime. Samuel occasionally turned back to hurl fireballs, knocking down the insects that got too close. Suddenly, a sinister laugh echoed in Samuel's ears, followed by a demonic claw reaching for his core. Ack! A painful cry rang out. When the demonic claw touched Samuel Cross, it melted instantly as if ice had met burning steel. Startled, the creature quickly withdrew its claw. Hearing the cry, everyone turned their heads. They saw Samuel standing firmly on his flying sword, with a mass of humanoid black mist swirling behind him. Andrew Turner nodded silently, relieved that he had brought Samuel along. Without him, they truly wouldn't have had anyone to cover their retreat. Gradually, Samuel lost sight of the others ahead as his flying speed was far too slow. The demonic entity, after numerous failed attempts to harm Samuel, eventually vanished. It was unclear whether it had gone after the others or abandoned the chase altogether. As dawn broke, Samuel Cross sat cross-legged on his flying sword. Since he couldn't catch up to the group, he decided to fly at his own pace. The flying insects relentlessly hurled themselves at Samuel, only to fall stunned, unable to penetrate his skin, which was tougher than stone. Realizing the insects couldn't harm him, Samuel stopped wasting fireballs and let the swarm buzz around him. Suddenly, two streaks of light approached from afar. Before they even got close, they launched several fireballs, scattering the insects. Samuel squinted and recognized Andrew Turner and Daniel Brooks. Daniel called out, "Samuel, we thought something had happened to you. We've been waiting for you for ages." Samuel replied, "What could possibly happen to me? I'm not afraid of demonic entities, and these insects can't even bite me. It's just that my flying speed is too slow." With that, he joined the two and flew out of the swarm, heading toward a stone hut set up on the ground. Inside the stone hut, Arthur Gray, who had been injured, was nowhere to be seen. Kevin Owens and Sophia White looked pale, either from exhaustion or injuries. Emma Stoner and Edward Turner, however, were unharmed. Andrew Turner sighed, "I really need to reevaluate body cultivators. People always say body cultivation has no future, but if Samuel hadn't covered for us last night, I doubt many of us would still be sitting here today." Daniel Brooks nodded in agreement. "Everything has its pros and cons. When we return, I'm going to find a body cultivation technique to train in. I don't need to be as strong as Samuel, half his level would be good enough." Emma Stoner then asked, "Samuel Cross, what happened to the demonic entity?" Samuel Cross shook his head and said, "I don't know either. It attacked me a few times, but all attempts failed. After that, it stopped appearing. I'm not sure if it has left or is still following behind us." Samuel Cross's mention of following behind made everyone's faces turn pale. Emma Stoner said, "With the cultivation level of that demon, it wouldn't dare come out during the day." Fellow Dawes Turner, "How far is it from here to the swamp?" Andrew Turner sighed, "If we maintain the same pace as last night, we can fly out of the wasteland before nightfall. But by then, we'll have exhausted our essence energy. If the demon chases us out of the wasteland, our chances of survival will be slim." Sophia White said, "We should stick to yesterday's plan, refrain from wasting magical energy to fly during the day, and run with full effort at night. Just endure until dawn, and we'll be fine." After the swarm outside the stone hut dispersed, the group set off again. Samuel Cross had been flying all night and had only rested briefly earlier. However, no one suggested taking another break. At this critical moment, even if Samuel Cross couldn't continue, they wouldn't care. Everyone prioritized their own survival above all else. Daniel Brooks suddenly approached Samuel Cross and said, "Brother Samuel, you seem to have expended some magical energy. I happen to have some vitality pills, which can help restore it." As he spoke, he took out a bottle of pills and handed it to Samuel Cross. Samuel, needing the help, didn't hesitate. He accepted the bottle, opened it, and poured out a single pill. The round, vibrant red pill emitted a fragrant medicinal aroma. It was indeed a vitality pill. Samuel swallowed it in one gulp, then handed the bottle back to Daniel, saying, "Thank you, Brother Brooks." Daniel waved his hand dismissively and said, "Keep the whole bottle, Brother Samuel. I have another one with me. Consider this a gift between comrades." Samuel Cross responded, "How could I accept this?" A single vitality pill cost 20 low-grade spirit stones, and the entire bottle was worth several hundred. Daniel Brooks replied, "Don't refuse, Brother Samuel. Or do you look down on me and not wish to be friends?" Hearing this, Samuel immediately pocketed the bottle and said, "All right, since you put it that way, I will accept it." Daniel Brooks smiled, then returned to his original position. The day passed uneventfully, but as soon as the sun dipped below the horizon, the group scattered like birds, stepping onto their sword lights and flying toward the distant sky. Samuel Cross, however, continued to walk slowly. He wasn't afraid of the ghostly entity chasing them, but preferred to avoid the incessant buzzing of the others flitting around him. He decided to walk on the ground instead. Sure enough, the ghostly figure trailed behind the group, and Samuel saw her. She was dressed entirely in black, her long hair as dark as ink. Her head was slightly bowed, her face showing no ferocity, only a deep, melancholic sorrow. Seeing the female ghost, Samuel cross-chuckled and said, "What now? Can't intimidate me, so you've decided to try a softer approach?" The ghost gracefully bowed and said, "Kind sir, please grant me your mercy, and allow me to explain everything slowly." Samuel Cross nodded and said, "Go ahead." His steps did not falter. The female ghost, her body flickering and ethereal, stayed precisely 7 paces ahead of him. The female ghost spoke, "I am a woman who died unjustly. My deep resentment binds me to this place. The days are so lonely that whenever I meet brave souls like you, I cannot help but harm them." Samuel Cross replied, "Oh. And then?" The female ghost continued, "If you can take me away from this place, I vow to serve you as a slave for the rest of my life." As she finished, she raised her head. A stunningly beautiful face appeared before Samuel Cross. Her face was as radiant as the full moon, her lips a vivid red. Her eyebrows were delicately shaped, her teeth white, and her eyes bright. But what captivated most was her gaze, misty like the spring rain in March, nourishing all it touched without drenching. Her face was so flawless, as if painted by an artist. Suddenly, Samuel Cross felt a chill in his heart. Painted? The female ghost, who had approached closer to Samuel Cross, suddenly noticed a glint of cold light in his eyes. Startled, she retreated 7 paces. Samuel Cross sneered and said, "Why are you coming closer to me?" The female ghost replied, "I wanted to hear your answer clearly." Samuel Cross said, "Fine, come closer now." The female ghost hesitated, "I do not dare." Samuel Cross asked, "Why not?" The female ghost answered, "Your gaze looks as if you want to devour me." As she spoke the words, "devour me," her face flushed red, and she lowered her head. Samuel Cross observed the female ghost's expression, his heart wavering for a moment. Suddenly, he snapped out of it, alarmed. Gritting his teeth, golden light erupted from his body as he bellowed, "Buddha's radiance illuminates all." The female demon let out a startled cry, attempting to flee, but it was already too late. The golden light emanating from Samuel Cross enveloped her like sunlight melting snow. Her body gradually shrank until it finally dissipated into a wisp of green smoke, vanishing into the air. The Buddhist radiance technique merely unleashed spiritual power in the form of holy light. For someone of Samuel Cross's cultivation level, this technique wasn't particularly powerful. However, since the opponent was a demonic entity, he decided to take a gamble. If this female demon had fought as fiercely as she did the previous night, Samuel Cross wouldn't have been afraid. But if she continued her deceptive gentleness as she had moments ago, he feared he might lose his focus. Thus, he chose to strike ruthlessly. "You've indeed mastered the Vajra demon-suppressing mantra," a calm female voice called out from the darkness. Along with the voice, a figure slowly emerged. Samuel Cross lowered his voice and asked, "Who's there?" In truth, he already knew. He recognized that voice distinctly. Asking was merely a stalling tactic. The Buddhist radiance technique had drained his spiritual power significantly, leaving him momentarily depleted.